The Cuomos, they're gone. Both of them. Wow. Andrew Cuomo's ousted in this pest scandal. We'll keep it a little family friendly. And now his brother has been suspended from CNN indefinitely. I guess they say pending further review. So maybe they're going to wait for everything to die down and try and bring him back. Or maybe this is it. The brothers Cuomo have been officially canceled and they're both gone. I mean, this is big because none of us thought this was going to happen. We said yesterday that maybe he'd get fired and everyone's response was it will never happen. And well, to be honest, he still wasn't fired, but he's off the air. So that'll be really interesting. We got to talk about that. We also got to talk about what Twitter is doing because Twitter is now going to be censoring all media from individuals if you don't have their consent. Now they say, if you're a public figure, maybe we'll allow it if it's newsworthy. We'll see, depending on the context. But we're really worried that, private or information can be used against women and minorities and activists and dissidents. So we understand where that is going. And then we got new information coming out of the Kim Potter trial, the Daunte Wright shooting. There's a jury selection is ongoing. And, of course, Jussie Smollett. So we'll get into all of that stuff. A lot of really great stories today. And joining us to go through all of this is Matt Walsh.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I have my own podcast, The Matt Walsh Show, but what I really am now embracing is my role as a children's author.
Yes.
And I forgot my cardigan, but Johnny the Walrus is on sale right now. It was on Amazon. We sold out in one day.
Whoa.
We charted number 4. My story about a trans walrus, and we sold out, but we're going to restock it. Go to johnnythewalrus.com and get the book.
And I saw the reviews are all pretty good. People being like, "Hey, this is a great thing."
Yeah, I think all the reviews are people that didn't actually read the book yet, but
Right.
but still, they could just tell based on the cover.
I think we got sent one, and I'm pretty sure I did read it.
Yeah, this is it. This
But
is
I like the 1-star reviews are not about the book; they're about the perceived politics of the book, which I find interesting because it's a children's book, so it's not explicit; it's implicit.
Yeah.
And so they're upset about the implicit narrative.
It's also funny because the book is about a little child who's imaginative and creative, and he pretends to be different things, and then he pretends to be a walrus one day, and he's got like wood spoons in his mouth as tusks, and then his mother endeavors to actually raise him as a walrus, as like because she's been told by the internet that you have to raise a child however they identify. So I don't say anything about trans in the book. So the critics that are saying, they're the ones kind of making that connection. So.
Right. Hey, there it is. Well, awesome, man. Glad to have you. We'll talk some news, and we also got Luke hanging out.
We're going to do a reading later, which I'm really excited about. Hi, my name is Luke. My YouTube channel is We Are Change, and one of my core principles is that if you need violence to enforce your ideas, then your ideas are worthless. And I was like, hey, that could make a really good t-shirt. So I decided to make one. And if you want one of your own, you can get it exclusively on thebestpoliticalshirts.com. And because you do, I'm still here. So thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys.
That's a veiled threat, by the way. He's like, if you don't buy my shirts, I'm leaving.
I'll be gone. Florida seems really nice right now.
True, it does. That's true.
I don't know if you've done the audio version of that yet. The Johnny the Walrus.
The reading.
It would be like a 30-second audiobook, but yeah.
Ring the bell to turn the page. Did you ever have those growing up, those records?
No.
I'm going way back to the 80s.
Yeah.
I had to
Sorry.
get
Before my
that.
time.
When you turn the page, the bell would ring. You don't
That's
remember
cool.
that?
No.
No, I don't remember
Great
that.
records, yeah.
I remember that. That's
Sup,
pretty
dude?
cool.
Yeah.
I remember those little books where they had the gold,
Yeah, the gold binding.
Yeah, binding.
Yeah, the little
then-
golden books.
yeah, little golden
Unfamiliar.
Yeah.
Unfamiliar territory. Thank
Yeah,
you.
true. Yes, we're having flashbacks over here. Great books. I'm excited to talk about this kid's book because I was listening to Matt talk about it on the way on my commute. And I was like, this is actually a really good idea. And I think people are liable to dismiss it and think it's silly. But at the same time,
Just because the pages are cardboard, people think it's not
Come
serious
on, man.
literature.
Yeah,
Come on.
seriously. Yeah. But you're like an advanced children's author, even though you're not wearing a cardigan. We're prepared to accept this. And I'm really excited to talk about it.
Well, it wasn't you who wrote the book with no words in it, was it?
Michael Knowles.
That was Knowles.
Yeah,
Okay,
Knowles
okay.
did that.
Right. Very, very prestigious authors.
Well,
great.
he's kind of in the same position I am because he's written like real books, and then he's got his blank book, and he'll never sell as many copies of any real book as he will the blank book. And I'm in the same. I wrote 2 real books and nobody read them, and then I write this and it sells out in one day. So
Great.
I think it's useful to parents who want that message, so it makes sense. But all right, before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, go to lightbug.com, LYTEBUG.com for probably the simplest product we've ever had sponsor the show, and it's actually pretty cool. This is the Lightbug. It is a solar-powered LED light with multiple settings. It's got this little solar panel here, and it can actually fold open 180 degrees. You can use it to prop it up. So if you need an emergency light or emergency kit for your car or your cabin, or maybe you're going off-roading or something and you want it, this thing's really cool because not only is it a light, it's also a USB phone charger. So it's kind of like a big bulky version of what we shouted out yesterday, which was the solar charger. It's a solar-powered battery. This one, it's actually a solar-powered light, and it just so happens you can charge your phone off it. It really is that simple. So, in the event of an emergency, I think these things would be pretty great to have in your vehicle. And that's really all we have to say. I mean, it's as I mentioned 5 times now, it's simple. So go to lytebug.com. Shout out to these companies that are willing to sponsor shows like this, because of course we talk about things that the mainstream, the establishment, the corporate press aren't big fans of. So any one of these companies that wants to get behind, the work we do, we're eternally grateful for. And again, lightbug.com, you'll get 50% off and use the promo code Timcast25 for an additional 25% off. But don't forget, go to timcast.com, become a member, and you can directly support all of our journalists. And you can get access to our exclusive members-only segments of the show. We put them up every night around 11 or so p.m., so you're not going to want to miss it. They're fantastic. And they are not family friendly. A lot of swearing, a lot of nasty stories. But, this is the dark stuff that we like to get into. But don't forget also to smash the like button, subscribe to this channel. And I'm also extremely excited to announce YouTube actually approved our Step on Snack and Find Out shirt. And now it is pinned in the chat. Because we put that up over a month ago. It's a month and a half. And YouTube was not approving it. And then all of a sudden it appeared. And now we're able to pin it. So if you haven't seen that yet, actually, I don't think I have it pulled up, but if you should check it out. It's awesome. It's funny. I love it. Let's get into that news. And share the video and all that stuff. Let's talk about Chris Cuomo. We got this story from the New York Times. CNN suspends Chris Cuomo after new details on help he gave his brother. The cable news network's top-rated anchor was an enthusiastic advisor to Andrew Cuomo in the last 18 months of his governorship. But I love how they don't use the headline, Chris Cuomo suspended indefinitely after stalking the victims of his creepy Cuomo brother. Instead, they're like, well, he was helping his brother. It's almost like they're trying to make it sound like a good thing and get people to be like, how could they do that to Chris Cuomo? But this is an example of media collusion, Democrat-friendly media. Chris Cuomo on CNN. CNN, of course, is not a news institution at this point. They're content creators. That's about what they are. And they not only give favorable coverage to their Democrat buddies, Chris Cuomo not only helped cover up, or at least not report on, to be as fair as I can, the elderly who were being killed in these nursing homes, but he actively assisted his brother. It's a conflict of interest for the network. It's a conflict of interest for him personally. But the craziest thing about it was that he was actually trying to dig up dirt on those who were accusing his brother. I think I'm surprised to hear it, that CNN's actually suspending him. Nobody believed it was going to happen. I don't know what you guys think.
They got Fredo. Now, please do Cooper and Wolf Blitzer, please.
And the brain eating guy.
And the brain, he's gone already.
Yeah,
but there's also a Potato Head in there, and other Vanderbilts. There's a lot of different people in there. But regardless of that, it's interesting to see him suspended, because it's also going to be interesting to see if he got paid vacation for this. But with the way CNN has been behaving, I wouldn't be surprised if they pull off another Lubin Tubin kind of incident, and he comes back in 6 months and then gives kind of a half-assed apology, and then kind of continues on with his trauma-based mind control that he kind of spews to the general public.
Trauma-based?
So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. A lot of people are saying, why wasn't he fired? I do think he's going to come back, but that's just my own personal opinion later down when everything kind of dies down.
Yeah, I think for me, I wish I could join in the parade of celebration. And I don't like Chris Cuomo either, and I'm happy that, I think he deserves to get fired. It couldn't have happened to a more deserving guy. But at the same time, you just know that they're going to replace him with someone who's 50 times worse. It's the same thing that happened in New York, and everybody on the right was celebrating because Andrew Cuomo got the axe. And I'm usually taking the cynical view of things. So in that case, I'm thinking, well, there's a reason why the left has decided to throw this guy under the bus, because they never throw their own guys under the bus, and they're only going to do it if they know they have somebody waiting in the wings who's going to be even more their servant on the far left. And so then Kathy Hochul gets in there. And
that's how you say your name, Hochul?
That's how I say it. I have no idea if that's actually Hochul, I don't know. But she gets in there, and she's far more far left than Cuomo was. And so, it's going to be the same thing. They're going to replace him with someone like their own version of Joy Reid or something on CNN.
Take a look at, Andrew and Chris Cuomo. They're white men. So certainly, I know it's, a little silly to bring up, but I'm willing to bet that there are culty wokeists who are just like, what can we do to remove these guys? and so they'll exploit any crisis. Now, truth be told, Andrew Cuomo, there's pictures of him grabbing people. And then my favorite thing about his whole scandal was he was like, let me show you all a montage of me grabbing more people to prove that I do it to everybody. And I'm like, oh, so he admits it, right? But Chris, as a member, as a staff member at CNN, we all assumed even yesterday talking about this that he was going to be protected. The fact that they're suspending him indefinitely, it could mean that they could decide to bring him back and say pending further review or whatever. But yeah, they're going to have someone fill that slot immediately. And how much you want to bet it's going to be someone who's particularly woke.
Yeah, I bet there's probably some inner politics that we don't even know about that kind of unfolded here, because to see both Cuomo brothers taken down by the establishment kind of shows that there's something else happening here that we don't know about. I mean, it was the New York Attorney General that released the private messages between him and his brother. So obviously something bigger here is at play. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a bigger power move, and if there was a request for the Cuomos to do something and then they kind of turned it down. I think there's a possibility for that, but again, we're kind of speculating here. But
why did she release the text? Do we know?
She's, for one thing, she's running for governor, so she wants his job.
Wow.
So that's one thing.
Jeez.
But you also brought up a good point about, I didn't even think about this, but Tubin.
Yeah.
So some,
Lubin Tubin is officially his
Hold
internet
on.
name.
Yeah.
His name is Tubin.
Right.
Yeah, come on, man.
but somehow he survives. And the thing about that, people talk about that and they say, well, he accidentally was on camera, or it was a big mishap. No, he didn't know he was on camera, but he didn't accidentally fall and trip and pleasure himself. That part he did on. He knew that he was he tried to do that during a meeting. The only thing is he didn't know that people were watching him. So that's a really serious infraction when it comes to sexual harassment in the workplace. And somehow he survives that at CNN. And women at CNN have to go into the break room and be around this guy, drinking a cup of coffee, knowing
He's at a meeting with other women, and he's lubing the tubing. I mean, and imagine your conversations with someone. It's just sick on so many levels. Like, how more perverted can you get than
CNN?
It is CNN. It is
No,
pretty seedy place.
Yeah. I'm like, with everything that's gone at CNN, first, we got the guy who ate the brains. You remember that? Reza Aslan ate human brain.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he ate. Reza Aslan ate human brain.
And then he lost his mind.
And, maybe he was always crazy. He ate human
I don't
brain.
know. Yeah.
But he eats human brain. I just got to say it a couple times. People need to understand this about the CNN host. Did a show where he sat down with a bunch of, religious. It was like a Hindu extremist group. They gave him a small piece of brain, and he ate it.
Yeah.
So you've got things like that.
How did they get the brain?
I
Do we
don't
know
know.
that?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
I think it was from a deceased person, if I remember correctly.
Possibly.
The video's still up on YouTube, and YouTube still actively promotes CNN, even though they cause so much irreversible harm to female employees and other innocent people.
I was going to say that too. So you not only have that, you have Chris Cuomo and the conflicts of interest, and you have Don Lemon.
He's
who
facing
also,
charges.
Yeah, he also assaulted a guy, and he's accused of assaulting a guy.
Yeah.
What did he do? He shoved his hands in his pants and then shoved them in the guy's
Roped him
face.
or
The details are of course contested here, but it's adult assault, family-friendly show of another man. Those are the accusations against him. It's going to go in a trial soon. It's going to be divulged, all the details. So it's going to be.
And now, and then we obviously Cuomo's conflict of interest, trying to dig up dirt on the accusers against his brother. And now that we got to get into this Tubin thing, because you brought up a really good point, and I want to stress this. Imagine you are, so here's what happens with Tubin. He's in a virtual, it was like a Zoom meeting, right, with a bunch of people, and he decides he's going to crank it out while watching all of his coworkers.
Right. Yeah.
And he didn't realize his camera was still on. So they suspend him. They bring him back. Now, you brought up a really good point in the break room, but imagine this. Imagine you got to call the guy, and you're like, imagine a female employee. And they're told like, oh, can you get on a call with Tubin?
Nope, can't
no,
do that.
Hold on a second. I gotta write something down.
Oh gosh.
Like, because imagine this. Imagine what it would be like if you're, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, and you call this guy and he's on a treadmill, and like
he's panting and breathing heavy.
Yeah. Tell me more. Tell me more about the project.
That's a good idea.
I don't think he spends a lot of time on a treadmill.
I don't think so either.
Tell me more how you hate Trump.
Oh god.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And then he's like, I was set up. I was on the
Getting
staircase.
pumped the whole time.
Getting pumped.
Getting pumped.
Getting pumped. That's one way to put it, Ian.
Oh my
A lot of
gosh.
people are laughing that I said that the brain came from a deceased person, and people are saying, "Yeah,
true.
obviously, yeah."
Thank
But
you.
there's
so.
also a lot of
How did he
people-
become deceased?
Yeah,
That's really the question.
that's really the question. Yeah.
There's also a lot of "Let's go Fredo" comments in the chat
Yes.
room, and I think one of the best comments that I saw about this situation was from Danny Polishchuk, who said, "Another content creator bites the dust," with the news of Fredo getting fired.
love
So
Have you seen? Do you watch like Ryan Long's comedy?
Yeah.
He did a bit with Danny Polishchuk. I'm saying that wrong, right?
I'm sure you are.
Polishchuk. And
Polishchuk.
Danny's joke was call these journalists content creators. And then Ryan is like, that the people on the leftist journalists will freak out, and the right would be like, or whatever, and like not really care. So I agree. So I've been calling the people at CNN content creators.
I
I'm
like
not gonna,
that.
they're not journalists.
Well, it's like the MSNBC. They decided that Rachel Maddow wasn't actually a journalist. They're like, oh, she's giving too much of an opinion to be a journalist. So it's like, yeah, she's basically a content creator. What'd you call her?
I mean, I think it's fine to call them pundits.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But content creator is meant to Ryan nails it.
Yeah.
It's going to drive them crazy, and none of us would care to be called it.
Right.
Like, I don't know, whatever.
I like the old school kind of prostitutes. I think that
I
has
like
a nice
that.
ring
That's
to
nice,
it.
yeah.
Personally, myself, but I think universally, if we just all started calling them content creators, it would really bother them and get underneath their skin. So I think we should normalize
I
this
think
and
so, too.
implement this rule.
It's good
This
trolling.
kind of
Yeah,
unspoken rule, like, hey, if we're going to refer to these people, one, we shouldn't be calling them the mainstream media. They're the corporate media.
Yeah.
Two,
Yeah, I agree.
they're not journalists. They're content creators.
Yeah, and CNN's media content creator Brian Stelter, of course, will eventually run a segment being like, the new attack from the right, referring to hardworking journalists as content creators. And then he'd have
Republicans
Republicans pounce, and they'd have like a round table of like, the strategy here is really to diminish the role we do in holding power to account and speaking truth to power. And
Yeah, remember when they compared themselves to like active military members? CNN
Yeah.
did this. They're like, yeah, we're the best. It was like 2015.
It's
Brian Williams did that
yeah.
perfectly, too.
Yeah, he sure did.
It's a good point too, because I actually wouldn't care the bias and all that kind of stuff. It wouldn't bother me if they were just called something else. The fact that they claim to be journalists is the problem, because the thing is, when we hear everyone complain about bias in the media's always been biased. You go back and read like headlines from newspapers during the Civil War era, and it's extremely partisan. The difference is back then they didn't pretend otherwise. They embraced the fact that we have a point of view. So the problem with CNN is that if they would just admit that, look, we come from a left-wing perspective, this is what we care about, this is our perspective, then like, fine, do your thing. Just don't pretend otherwise.
It's weird though. I mean, I don't think the current left-right phrasing, I've said this for a while, it makes literally no sense. But I've kind of come to an understanding. The reality is there are two realities. And so I think all of us in this room exist in one political compass reality, and that is honest and true reality. Of course, we believe that. That's why we're all sitting here. But what I mean is, we fact check things. We try to make sure we get things right. Good example, the Covington kids, this big fake news, thing thrown out in the media, or Kyle Rittenhouse. We're the kind of people, whether we agree or disagree on certain political policies or certain, economic policies, we all agree on what is real because we've looked at it and said, oh, okay, Trump didn't really do anything wrong when he was throwing the food into the koi pond. He was just doing what Shinzo Abe did. But then you have this other political compass of people who live in the Matrix. It's almost like a blue pill, red pill political compass. So it's funny when you see these people will say like this show is right wing. What they're really saying is they exist in a separate reality. Because I certainly think I'm to the left of you, Matt, and like we can agree on the truth, but we probably disagree on policy positions. But we can sit here and have conversation because we agree on what is real. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the point. Like to talk about the leftists and to mention CNN. Well, populist socialist types would be like CNN is not left wing. They're right wing. It's like no, hold on. In your bubble world, yeah, CNN is the right wing. In the fake reality they live in, the corporate press is authoritarian and right wing.
So it's almost like they have their own scale of right and left.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. So they're like, this is CNN is right wing, and then everything else. I think it was you, Matt, that was talking, I think yesterday, about having a curated reality. I think you mentioned the Truman Show. It was a great comparison.
Yeah, I like content creator. I kind of stumbled on this thing yesterday that another way of looking at the corporate media is that they're reality curators. And that's a lot of what they do. They don't necessarily lie, and well, they do plenty of lying, but most of the time they're not like pretending something happened when it didn't really happen. Again, they do that, but more often the bias comes from deciding what to tell us about, what bits of reality to bring to our attention. And I think about that scene in the Truman Show, which I brought up, when the director was asked, like, why hasn't Truman ever questioned his reality? And the director said, well, we accept the reality of the world that we're presented. And there's a lot of truth to that you just kind of accept it. Also, that word presented is important because that's how most of us, it's not that we're like encountering reality or discovering it. We kind of sit back and we stare at our screens all day and we have reality presented to us. We have people, usually corporate media, telling us, well, this is reality, this is what's true, but it's all curated based on what they want us to believe. And so Waukesha, for example, is a good example of something that doesn't fit into the reality that they want us to understand. So that doesn't make it in. They don't curate that for us.
Well, they very simply just say an SUV, hit people, an accident caused by an SUV. But I'll point out too, just as a side note on the Truman Show thing, it's a good point. We don't question the reality presented. In the Truman Show, he starts to notice things, like he goes into a building and there's no elevator, it's a set. But if he was born there and his whole life was seeing that kind of stuff, he'd never question it. He'd be like, oh, another studio set behind an elevator. I see him all the time.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason they call it programming, and I think there's something to say about echo chambers and the carefully curated algorithms that give us information that, of course, enforce a particular viewpoint. And the power that big tech social media has, they have the will to impose people's perceptions and ideas. And there should definitely be a bigger discussion about this. But earlier, Tim, I think you said something that definitely is important to talk about, is that it's not really left and right. It's whether you believe in authoritarianism or if you believe in freedom. I think that's the true kind of bigger political compass that people should be talking about, that people should be understanding. And when it comes to even calling them content creators, I think that's giving them too much credit because they're not creating content. They're regurgitating, repeating corporatist talking points that, of course, special interest feed them, and they just regurgitate it back to the general public.
We know, but content creator is meant to irk them.
Yes.
Maybe corporate content regurgitator or
I like
creator.
that too.
I don't know.
Look,
yeah.
When it comes to the different political compasses, idea of like the blue pill false reality within the corporate press, I don't think that adequately explains, the phenomenon we're experiencing with the culture war. Because I've thought about that. Maybe it's just the libertarian spectrum. Of course, we all agree. If I'm more about freedom, but I lean left, and you're about freedom, we'll probably get along. But if you're authoritarian, we're not going to get along. But I have a friend, actually. We have his painting up. Where is it? Brent.
Oh, yeah.
You can't see it. It's off camera. Because I've had people be like, I don't believe Tim has any left-wing friends. Like, oh, no, Brent's really cool. And he made this comic book called Snow White Zombie Apocalypse that I've helped kickstart a couple times because I think it's fantastic. Really, really great art. Cool story. It's not super political or anything. But, we were having a discussion about Kyle Rittenhouse. And he's very much in the corporate press version of what Kyle Rittenhouse was doing. He was posting on Facebook saying the prosecution's case is super strong. I was surprised. He was repeating the prosecution's talking points you'd probably hear on MSNBC or things like that. And when we were talking about it, he said, we got to this point where he said something. I was talking about the prison system, it being broken anyway. And I don't understand why he would be on the side of the state in this regard. And he was like, the state is illegitimate. And I was like, okay, well, hold on there a minute. I was like, we can agree on almost everything. We come to this point where we're like, when you say the state is illegitimate, I'll be a bit facetious and say we agree on that. And what I mean is, like, we disregard the establishment, the authority, and the lies and the manipulation. But when you're in this different version of reality, we can't work together towards like solving any problem, because his version of reality is, Kyle Rittenhouse was a violent reactionary who showed up to hurt protesters. And I'm like, but that's just not true. If you live in the world of the corporate press, it doesn't matter if you think the state is illegitimate and you're an anarchist. You live in a false reality where your motivations are fueled by incorrect information, leading you to cheer for the state, like he was doing. So I mean that with all due respect. I think he's a cool dude, but there we very seriously disagree on what is even true or not.
Yeah, it's gonna as curation, like you were saying. These companies are basically curating what we see. Deepfakes. When people, they're going to be able to be like, they're going to show you something that's not real, and they're going to tell you it's real, and then they're going to be able to be like, we wash our hands of it, we received it, we checked it out, it looked real to us, we were just reporting on what we thought was real, And then people are going to be seeding all these deep fakes that are like,
Yep.
It might even be the news organizations that create the deep fakes we find later, but then they're just telling us they didn't know they were fake.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Spider-Man 3.
What about it?
Sam Raimi's.
Yeah.
So you've
Is that
got
the dancing one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I bring this up because it was on TV and I happen to have seen it.
Oh.
But there's a scene where Eddie Brock is the character who wants to be a staff photographer. Peter Parker has been a freelance photographer there for years. So Eddie Brock is sucking up to Jameson, who's the editor in chief or the whatever position he has. And he says, whoever gets me a photo of Spider-Man with his hand in the cookie jar gets the job. So what does Brock do? He photoshops an image of Spider-Man committing a crime. They run it on the front page. He gets hired. They later find out they have to retract. I think it's a stretch, if in real life they probably wouldn't retract. They'd just be like you said, well, we were reporting the truth at the time, so there you go. But as much as it's a silly fictional example of this, I bring it up because that's what happens. You have quote unquote journalists who are like, I need to move up in this company. I need to get traffic. There are a lot of companies that pay their writers based on how many clicks they get.
Oh, wow.
Like this is Gawker. Gawker was notorious for get a bunch of views, you get paid more money. A lot of right-wing websites do the exact same thing. What are you going to get? You're going to get people trying to write as clickbaity, sensational stuff as they can, and eventually you'll find people who. Here's a good example. You ever see the movie Nightcrawler?
Yeah.
Amazing movie. Jake Gyllenhaal, and he's a sociopath trying to find a way to make money. And he stumbles upon night crawling. It's when you go out in the middle of the night and track down crimes, fires, crashes, hurt people, and things like that. And he begins actually staging, I don't want to ruin the movie because it's so good, but he's a nasty sociopath who stages some of these photos. You get these people in media. Then you give them the virtue signal ability to pretend to be political, and they will run with it. Now they've got a safety net, a barrier to where they can make things up, write garbled nonsense to get massive clicks, make money, and they're protected when they do it. Why? Because they're on the right side of history, so they say.
They're not just protected, their competition is eliminated and, of course, fact-checked into oblivion and downranked in the algorithm where you can't even see them, even if you're subscribed to them. I think it was BuzzFeed that had an infographic at their office studio showing the articles that are getting the most amount of shares and a live number update graphic showing everyone working there what's getting the clicks, what's not getting the clicks. And once you kind of involve yourself into pleasing the algorithm, you're involved in pleasing, of course, the agenda of the people who are creating the algorithm. Who's creating the algorithm? Who's running the algorithms? What's the response and result of these algorithms? Well, I think superficially we could look at it and see there's a lot of depression, there's a lot more suicide, there's a lot more self-hate, there's a lot of other psychological issues that are encroaching and becoming more of a problem every single day. And when we look at these algorithms, they rule our lives because they rule perceptions and understandings. And once you have control of that, in my opinion, you have control of everything. And that's why the world is in one factor so messed up as it is right now because of this tightly controlled small viewpoint that they're doing everything in their power to make sure that you don't see outside of it. And when you do, you see that it's full of crap.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I was noticing today was that Twitter, I know we were talking yesterday about how their new CEO might be worse than the old one. It turns out that this is definitely going to be the case because one of the things that they're going to do is remove the right of these independent journalists to post material that's not approved, right? So it's going to be a serious issue as far as actual journalism, because I really feel like the Rittenhouse trial was such a triumph for places like the Daily Caller, right-wing journalists who are actually on the ground, and unbiased journalists who really went out there and did the work. So I feel like Twitter's really twisting it.
Yeah, Dorsey is not the demon that he had been made out to be. He was has 5% of Twitter and was basically holding on for dear life, trying to make it something useful.
I don't know.
Maybe.
The day he leaves and the new CEO's here's what real authority is.
Yeah, maybe so.
I think the challenge we face, at least to kind of wrap up this portion of the content curators and the corporate press and all that stuff, it's getting through to people. It's finding that regular person who maybe doesn't pay attention and being able to pitch them on their own intrinsic value, life, liberty, and happiness, but they have to want it. So when you have people who just say, look, man, I just want to fit in, they're going to walk right to, to Brian Stelter or whatever, other content creators at CNN and just say, tell me what to think and I'll think it because I just want to fit in. So how do we convince people be your own person, stand up for yourself. I don't know. Maybe you can't. Maybe what's really happening is a sorting algorithm of people who just want to follow and people who want to be independent.
And I think the other, really what we're talking about, the real division is we're now living in a country where there's basically at least two different realities that we're living in, and two different universes, really. So when people talk about, are we headed towards a civil war, that sort of thing, I think we're not, just because for a civil war you need like a geographic divide, which there isn't as much right now as there was in 1861, I would say. But I do think that we're more divided than we were in the Civil War. The conditions are there in that sense, because we just, when you get 100 Americans into a room from all over the country and you start talking to them, you'll find that they have absolutely nothing in common at all at no level. Like you talk to them about their fundamental priorities and values. What things do they care about the most? All that kind of stuff. You're going to find that there is almost no common thread bringing them all together. No commonality. Nothing uniting us. And there has to be some uniting principle, and there isn't.
It's two different moral frameworks at the end of the day. Right, you have the Christian, Judeo-Christian moral framework, and then you have this new wokist moral framework, which is completely removed from it. So one of the ways I explain it to people is Bill Maher is a great example. Clearly, a person who was raised on Christian moral values, even though he's an atheist. So he believes in free speech. He believes in innocent until proven guilty, concepts that are in the Bible. So in America, a lot of our foundational rights, inalienable rights granted by God, that was the perception of the founding fathers. Even people who were growing up in the 80s, 90s and becoming prominent might not believe in any of that stuff, but they hold those moral frameworks still within them from the traditions that they were handed, they were given. But now you have a new moral framework completely removed from all those values. They don't believe in the right of the innocent until proven guilty. You know, they're something completely separate if they even have a moral framework. I do want to mention, though, I disagree with you on the need for a geographical divide. That's an American perspective on civil war. If you look at a lot of other countries, Spanish Civil War is a really good example. They didn't have a geographical divide in the same way. They had cities versus the rural areas, rural nationalists and urban communists. So I believe that's what it was. I believe the communists were centered around cities. I could be wrong, but it was essentially fascists and communists. And if you look at the initial battle maps where the ideology started gaining power, it was splotchy. It was like the left-wing group was here, then it was over here, and they were not united or connected in any way. So we actually, that we do have in the United States. But in America, the Civil War here was based on, we have each individual state siding on a specific, states' rights, slavery versus, more united federalist power, which ultimately resulted in states breaking apart. And then the interesting thing, I think it was Texas, was like, we have no choice because we're surrounded by southern states who hold these values. We wouldn't be able to be on this side anyway. So in that sense, I think there's a you're sort of correct. I sort of agree with you.
That's a good point. So I guess I would go to my other reason why I don't think there's actually be a civil war is that nobody wants to leave their air conditioning and their TV for very long. Like we all there's not the wherewithal, the will for that sort of thing.
But I still disagree. Are you familiar with the fourth turning, the Strauss-Howe generational theory stuff?
No.
So they say it's like every 80 years there's a conflict. We had the American Revolution, 80 years later the Civil War, 80 years later, World War II. Now it's 80 years later, and what are we expecting to see in this fourth turning period? There's four separate 20-year periods. I'm not saying that's definitively true, but I certainly think we're headed towards a period of great strife. And I think that one of the other challenges with civil war is that people believe they look to history to get an example of what war is. And so we look back at the American Civil War and see people fighting. We look back at World War II and people are running through the fields. But we're in the era of social media, manipulation, and it's fourth and fifth generational warfare. So they're using propaganda, they're using corporate press, they're using censorship, they're using economic control. They don't need to point a weapon at you to convince you to do something if they can take away your ability to communicate with anyone else.
Or make you think that a weapon's being pointed at you, even though it's not.
Or you're going to face some repercussions if you commit wrong thing. And Matt, you made a very good point. We are very comfortable. We are very blessed. We are very lucky. You notice that especially if you travel the world and you compare our lifestyles to how everyone else is living. But that is rapidly changing right now, especially with the economic turmoil that's being created by the centralization of economic forces by the federal government, by the Federal Reserve, that I believe deliberately is trying to create havoc on the world economic market, that is creating not only inflation, shrinkflation, meatflation, but just the utter devaluation of the US dollar. And I think soon America will have to live like the rest of the world. I think there will be a shock. And in that shock, in that kind of larger transfer of wealth that has been happening since the beginning of this pandemic, I do think there's a potential for conflict. I hope it doesn't happen. I'm not saying it is going to happen, but I think there is a window where that potential opens, especially with the economic havoc coming our way, which I believe is deliberately being pushed on by a lot of centralized, big, powerful players.
Let's talk about the Twitter thing that, Lydia just brought this up a second ago. We have this story from Timcast.com. Twitter announces new expansion of its private information policy. The announcement has been noted for its vague language by Twitter users. So this is basically media that they deem to be private will be banned. They can now ban you. And they say in the rules explicitly that if you are not abusing someone, then they can still remove you now because they have a new rule set. This will mean independent journalists. It will mean that reporters on the ground who happen to be filming certain activists doing something will get all of that content removed. They then came out and said, well, we'll clarify. If it's a big protest or it's newsworthy, we'll consider the context. What does that mean? Andy Ngo is a great example. Andy Ngo is a journalist, and the left absolutely despises him because he reports on what Antifa and these other individuals are doing. So naturally, Twitter's probably going to say, oh, this is exposing activists, and it's really dangerous because they literally, in their rules, say activists, dissidents, women, and minorities are the most vulnerable. Now, if you, Matt, for instance, you went to Loudoun County, right? Mm-hmm. And you spoke there, they're not going to protect you. They're going to say, if a video comes out of you and you say, hey, look, this is a private video from an event, it's really bad for me as an activist, they're going to say, shut your mouth. They're going to say, oh, you don't count. You're not an activist. Andy Ngo is not a journalist. He doesn't deserve any protections.
I kind of feel like this is an expansion of their policy that they informally put in place with the Hunter Biden stuff. Because wasn't their argument that this was acquired through, untoward means or whatever, like through actual
illegal ways, illegally obtained.
Right,
I mean, they just should have saved everyone some time and just said future Project Veritas will no longer be allowed on the platform. That would have been more honest, because if you look at who this is going to affect, it's going to be investigative journalists, muckrakers.
It's literally Veritas.
Yes, it's literally. I mean, they just should have said this policy, no more Project Veritas videos on top of people sharing those videos. It's done. That's it.
It's also, people are parsing this on Twitter and saying, what does this mean? What about this? What about that? Well, that's the point. The ambiguity is the point. It's supposed to be vague because then that gives them the ability to decide. So they can just kind of decide, well, yeah, we're going to get rid of Project Veritas. We're not going to let another Rittenhouse situation happen ever again. They're saying where these videos come out to expose the truth. But then, of course, because the other thing is, well, what about all these cop videos? I mean, the George Floyd video, Derek Chauvin did not consent to having that video out there. But we can assume that all the cop videos are going to still be allowed, but they'll just be able to decide in the moment, and that's exactly what they're setting themselves up for.
It's the increasing movement towards homogenizing our culture once again. So it used to be we had a few media channels. Everybody listened to Walter Cronkite, just believed whatever he said, whether it was true or not. Everyone assumed it was true. And then with the birth of the internet, we had all of these different voices rising up. Boy, did they get mad when Alex Jones was getting hundreds of millions of views. We never approved this guy, so saith the establishment. So they get rid of him. They get rid of Milo. They get rid of Laura Loomer. They get rid of all these undesirables. Now, they got to contend with the fact that there's still dissident voices that are doing pretty well because people want and crave freedom and honesty and information. Oh, so they'll want to get rid of us. They don't like that, we have a show where we challenge the establishment. So what we're going to see with Twitter's, policy is Project Veritas got to go. Andy Ngo's reporting got to go. If we do, we did a story on Fauci's, the NIAID funding monkey maximum pain experiments. Yeah. Oh no, you can't publish those photos or that information about Fauci. It's private information. They will just decide. They've already done it with the Hunter Biden laptop story. They don't care about hacked information. Tons of hacked information has come up. They don't block it. Now they're just formalizing the rule and letting you know. The end result of this is over the next several years, eventually everyone will just be watching CNN. A lot of people say CNN's ratings are in the gutter. CNN got 100 million views on YouTube this month. We, on this show, I think, got like 25.
Right.
Timcast altogether maybe has like 40. So that's great. That's awesome. CNN is being given 100 million views. We fight for that. We work every day. We tell everyone, we beg, we drop on, we get down and we say, please, listener, share this video, because we aren't being promoted the way CNN is by YouTube, and they get free money, free promotion.
You're thriving in spite of everything that YouTube. It's the same thing that the Daily Wire, where I work at the Daily Wire. We do really well on Facebook. And the media's, the corporate media is always putting out these like exposés about, oh, look how well the Daily Wire is doing on Facebook. Obviously, Facebook favors right-wing content, or look what Facebook is doing to help out the Daily Wire. It's absurd, of course. We're doing well in spite of everything Facebook has done to stifle it. But this is just their way of getting rid of the competition. They don't like the fact that we do. And the reason why we do well is because people actually want this content, because they're looking for just common sense and truth and that sort of thing.
It may be that we are wading through the muck and the mire, and the water seems to be rising, trying to hold us back, but they're losing. They're losing. When I look at how explosive the Daily Wire has been, like what you guys have been doing, they can't stop you. Dude, you're gonna shatter through that. They set up this barrier trying to hold you guys back, but you're breaking through
CNN is on life support. It's like they're on a gurney being wheeled out in front of the White House, and they're like, everyone's like, "Hey, look, put all the cameras on CNN right now," and it's like, it's obvious that that's a dying art form.
Yeah.
There's this episode of The Outer Limits where this really old guy, death is trying to take him to the other side, but he's super rich, so he pays people to like keep giving him new hearts, and he's on like his 6th heart transplant. That's CNN.
Yes.
They're just like Ian explained it, but it's worse than that. They're like, old decrepit.
Another thing to really kind of think about here is that a lot of CNN viewers are force-fed CNN. People have to go out and find alternative media. People have to go out and find Timcast, Daily Wire, We Are Change, and that in itself is a huge victory that we're still able to survive when, of course, in the cyber gulags, they're literally shoving it down your throat, and people are still spitting it out and saying, wait, hold on, there has to be something better, there has to be something more nutritious for my body and my mind out there that actually has some semblance of truth and responsibility in it. And that's when they find other people that, and they're making it more and more difficult for them to find us, but people still are, thankfully.
Because I think that the corporate media is really fighting with their free market right now, which is really interesting to me, because they're trying to throttle it, and I'm a little bit concerned that the next step is going to be something like a government monopoly. Like, that genuinely concerns me, watching the collusion between the Democrats and the corporate media, as Luke reminds us to call it. It's very, very troubling to me to watch and see the reflection that like the parents in Loudoun County are talking about, how this very much reminds me of the Cultural Revolution in China. And I can't imagine that the government was exactly, easy on the media when they were trying to compel every single person in the country to conform with their will. So I'm not sure what the next step is, but it's a little bit unsettling.
Yeah, state media crackdown. You got to watch out for that.
Yeah,
I've explained it several times as this. There's this big island we're on. It's just sheer cliff on all sides, and you have people on the right side of this. The waves crash, the cliff erodes, and the far right falls into the ocean. What's next is conservatives. The waves crash, the cliff erodes, the conservatives all fall in. Then you've got moderate, slightly center right individuals. Then the centrists, and what's left is going to be people who believe anyone to the right of Mao is far right.
Yes.
That's who's going to be left standing.
Exactly.
Or, to be fair, a gigantic corporate, monolith saying, you guys are useful idiots for us. We accept that.
Well, I'm a little bit concerned because I'm going to make kind of an esoteric reference here, but there's a poem by, I think, William Butler Yeats, where it's called The Second Coming, and he talks about how the worst are full of, like, this ridiculous intention, and they have this strong desire to commit these worst acts, and the best are just like silent. And he says in that poem that the center cannot hold. That is so interesting to me, because I've heard the expression, if you stay in the center of the road, you're going to get run over. So I wonder if these values that the center holds, it's possible that the edges are being whittled away enough, and that their beliefs are weak enough that they're just going to
there was
collapse.
a left and a right in this country, and it started to split further and further apart. There's an amazing graph by Pew Research where it shows from 1994 till today how the left and the right have moved, and the right has moved like a teeny bit to the right, and the left has shot super far left. At that point, I always thought it's like, okay, well, we're really polarized. When in reality, what actually happened is it got so far that it broke off into two different realities.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There is no center or moderate position anymore, because
Right.
in between that is sort of like an abyss. And you look at the issue that I've written this book about, Johnny the Walrus, at johnnythewalrus.com, is just like this, because there's a question here. Okay, can a 4-year-old boy be a girl if he says that he is? And the answer to that question is either yes or no. There's no in between. Well, I'm kind of moderate on that. Biology, your biological sex, that's either a reality or it's not. And so many issues are like this now, where it's you really have to choose. It's a time of choosing, and you have to decide. I'm either on the side of reality or not. I don't think there's a moderate position.
This is what's been happening. I mean, this is a really good example that when you had who was that professor who was debating Jordan Peterson? Nicholas Matt, was that his name?
Yeah, that person.
So this professor who was in Canada said there's no such thing as biological sex. That's a misconception, and I would break that down, but in the interest of time, I won't. There are people who genuinely say things like that. Now, as we were talking about earlier, people don't question their reality. So if you have people who are born being told the moon is made of cheese, their whole life, they would never question it. It's the interesting thing about I grew up Catholic for several years, and then my family left the church. But I actually could understand faith-based arguments on the nature of reality. Why? Well, there's a lot of great philosophers in many of these religions. So when you actually come with a really with an actual religion, many of them I think are kind of out there. Some of them have very interesting, intelligent thinkers. Then I look at wokeism, and it's just garbled nonsense that makes no sense. But these people act as though they're part of a giant religion. It's a non-theistic religion.
I think I would even draw. I don't know if this is a real definitional distinction or not, but there's a difference between a religion and a cult. And I would look at wokeists or whatever we want to call them. It's more of a cult. It's kind of like Scientology, because the thing about a religion, say the Christian religion, for example, is that it has a lot to say about the world, about human nature, that even if you're not part of that religion, you can still understand and gain something from it. You don't have to be a Christian to read the Gospels and derive something from it and find it quite beautiful and useful. Whereas this wokeist stuff, I mean, I just, on my show, I read there was this, I forget who shared it, but it was a gender studies master's thesis from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee that someone found online, and they just shared it, and just the intro of it. And it's woke, CRT garbage, but it makes no sense at all. It's this like insular thing where you have to be in it to even understand what they're talking about. So if you're not with a real religion, you can gain some wisdom from it, even if you're not in it. With a cult like Scientology, you have to be in it first to be indoctrinated into their kind of logic to even know what the hell they're trying to say.
Non-white is a good word. You got to learn the definition of. Before you can start to understand the language.
One phrase that was used in this thing was the phrase anti-racist racist. And it just means nothing. It makes no sense. But you have to be first. You have to be indoctrinated into the cult first, and then you kind of can make sense of it.
This is kind of what I was meaning to get to, right? Like, or trying to explain with a good example is V for Vendetta. Love this movie. When Evie goes to that comedian's house and he shows her his secret room where he's got, I think it's gay porn or something like that.
Yeah, it's
because he's like, if the police found out I had this.
Yeah.
And she also says, "Is that a Quran?" Mm-hmm. She's like, "But you're not Muslim." And he says, "I don't need to be Muslim to find its stories moving or its imagery beautiful," or something like that. And that's a great point. I don't think you have to believe in the religion to read it and understand some of the ideas, to agree or disagree with some of these things. But when I've tried reading woke thesis, reports or whatever, or like scientific, I don't know, humanities, whatever you call academic studies. Yeah. It's like, they'll say something like extrapolating the anti-whiteness of white reasoning in white supremacist agriculture through the medieval archetypes. And you're like,
it doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't.
Yeah, you need to learn the language.
No. What I'm saying is, quite literally, it doesn't mean anything. And what you get are people mindlessly saying things that don't mean anything to each other, just to try and sound like they know more than they do.
It's meant to confuse you. It's meant to have you in this state of like, what's going on? 2 + 2 = 5. Yes, it is. Of course it is. Yes. Just tell me what to believe in.
Beyond that, it's to go like this. Luke. you clearly don't understand. Look, when I wrote my thesis on the archetypal white supremacist, anti-racist, racist, conflating with Antifa and the Wimixin of northern medieval tribes, if you don't understand that, then certainly you must step back and give me the room and the floor to speak, because you're not an expert here.
As an official person of color, I
right.
decline your.
I'm mixed race, Luke.
Oh snap!
Well, that doesn't matter. I think I'm on the hierarchy here.
Actually, that's true. That's true.
So,
I don't
you
know
lose.
I don't know if you
win.
know this, but the Coalition for Communities of Color have said that Slavic people are people of color.
Really?
So blonde hair, blue-eyed Luke
Yeah.
Rutkowski is a person of color.
Well,
Polish,
Congratulations.
Polish born. Thank you very much. I have my card. I laminated it, and I've been using it ever since.
So
Empathy
actually,
for your struggles.
Luke,
Thank
Luke,
you, Ian.
Luke, I do defer to you on the progressive stack because I'm actually German, Irish, British, and then part Korean. So I'm actually more white, and you're Slavic, so you're all 100% person of color.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I definitely trump you on that. But
I'll stop speaking. I'll just give you the
thank
floor.
you very much. I mean, we should call this show what it is, the Radowski Hour. But
Yeah,
anyway,
right.
no, what it is, it's also screeching. It's also a lot of emotion. It's also a lot of manipulation. And there's also no redemption in this kind of church of the cult that's being promoted on individuals that is absolutely just spewing nonsense. And I think this nonsense is done deliberately in order to acquiesce the general public into compliance, into having them on their knees, literally saying, yes, I will obey whatever crazy whims you decide for me. Because when you have someone at a state where they don't even know what they believe in, you have a state where they could be very easily controlled and manipulated at the whim of a mob that, of course, is also manipulated on social media and weaponized in a way where it creates people's actions to be manipulated by them. So I think that's an aspect here that we also should entertain with big tech's involvement in the kind of pushing of this cult.
I saw this hilarious meme, I guess, and it said, capitalism, everybody is poor and a few people are rich. Communism, nobody is rich, a few party members control everything. Socialism, anybody can be rich, but nobody is ever poor. And I was just like, man, these people are insane. But that's, I bring that up because the goal is communism and socialism. What's the difference? Honestly, very little, but there's a distinction, right? Socialism is the economic system. Communism is more the political system. Both are effectively the same thing. The means of production are owned by the people. What tends to happen is the same thing. Powerful elites gain control of everything, and then everyone is poor and suffers, and centralized planning doesn't work. But they use language manipulation to be like, we're not communists. In socialism, no one's poor.
It's literally said that the end goal of socialism is always communism, and I believe this to be the case based on what socialism does. It's very, very similar.
This is how they manipulate with language.
I know, they're good.
Let's jump to this next story and get into just I guess some of the goings on, and this story scares me. This is the Kim Potter trial, manslaughter charge in taser shooting death of Dante Wright. So the news today is they're doing jury selection. This story is important because this is what happens when you start losing your core moral framework. So one of the things we were just talking about is the Judeo-Christian moral framework, how within it, I believe, in the past, there were some, a lot of bad ideas in culture, but a lot of good ideas persisted. A lot of bad ideas were no longer carried on. And that's good news. We have free speech. We have life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. We have individual liberties. We have the innocent until proven guilty. And a lot of people don't know this, but the concept of being innocent until proven guilty is literally in the Bible. And the formulation of this idea expanded throughout history. Blackstone's formulation is better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent person suffer. To Benjamin Franklin, it is better that 100 guilty persons escape than one innocent person suffer. Literally comes from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. If there is but one righteous person, I will not destroy the city. Or you probably know better than I do, Matt. I bring this up as we get into this story because as we begin losing these values to a cult, as I like to call it, I think, I don't know, Matt, you refer to them basically the same way. They don't care about justice. They don't care about what's right. They just say, we want retribution and we want you to suffer. So what happens in the shooting of Dante Wright is a police officer was trying to arrest a man on a felony weapons charge. He had a warrant. The dude breaks free and jumps into his car. She yells, taser, 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 but pulls out her gun, shoots him. He drives off, crashes, dies from the gunshot wound. She would have been justified. I think most legal experts say if someone's wanted on a felony weapons charge and flees and jumps in their vehicle about to grab something, then the police are justified in assuming that's a deadly threat. But because she said taser and because they said it was an accident, she's getting charged with manslaughter. like many of the trials we've seen so far with Rittenhouse, with Chauvin, with Ahmaud Arbery, all of these cases are political, are not based in whether or not we are going to try and find the facts. It's based on whether or not we can win in the public's jurors, the businesses. They're all going to say, just give the left what they want.
I got to say, if the cop was justified in killing this guy, deadly weapons charge, he dives into his car, assuming he's going to grab a deadly weapon. If she yells out, I love you, before she shoots him, it's no different than yelling out, garble, garble, or taser, taser. It doesn't matter what you yell out when you're using justified deadly force beforehand.
Agreed.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind, and you already know this based on the track record, but the one thing we know about BLM martyrs, especially the ones from George Floyd and on, is that almost all of them are have a history of really horrific, violent crime, and almost always against women. So Daunte Wright is no exception there. I think it was a felony weapons charge that he was wanted on, but that also stemmed from or was related to an armed robbery where he, allegedly put a gun to a woman and robbed her, and also committed sexual assault, by the way, because he stuffed his hand into her bra looking for I guess for the money. And so sexual, and choked her. So very similar to what George Floyd did, barging into a woman's house, forcing his way into a woman's house at gunpoint and robbing her. So Daunte Wright did that as well, allegedly. And so we know that. And also the other thing is, I look at this as, from Kim Potter's perspective, I would equate it almost to like a medical error or something that maybe would happen with a surgeon. People die from medical errors all the time. Sometimes it's reckless and then you get litigation. People die from medical errors all the time. Sometimes it's reckless and then you get litigation. But oftentimes it's a life or death situation. Surgeons are human beings. They're not perfect. It's not always going to go the right way. We just sort of understand that we can't lock surgeons in jail every single time a surgery doesn't go the right way. And so in this, I look at it, it's kind of she's thrust into this life or death situation that she didn't create. Daunte Wright created it, number one, by being a felon and wanted on a warrant, and then number two, by fighting the cop. So now he has taken what should have just been a normal interaction where he says, okay, I'm going to go with you. I'm wanted on a warrant, and that's it. And I'll go to jail. But he turns it into this life or death struggle. He decided to do that, and then she makes a mistake in the midst of that. And it's unfortunate that she did, but the idea that now we're going to put you in jail for that, I think is absurd.
She knows
honestly.
it. She's heard on the body camera footage saying, I'm going to prison. And I think the reason she said that is because of the political landscape. So my attitude, what really bugged me is when all of these leftists came out and started saying defund the police, my attitude was like, cops should just quit. But none of them would do it. As bad as it had gotten. Now, I understand when activists go out and say, abolish the police or whatever, you ignore it. When they say abolish the police and then start burning down police departments, and then Kamala Harris fundraises for them, and Joe Biden wins an election after his staff had been bailing these people out, and 25 people die, you get to a point where you're kind of like, maybe you should give the people what they want. And a bunch of people on the left got mad at me for saying it, because I was like, abolish the police? Okay. And he's only saying that because he thinks people will be upset after they realize what happens when the police are gone. And I'm like, maybe. But does it matter if I agree with you? So when I see Kim Potter, and even she seems to know the political ramifications of what's happening today, and they still want to remain cops, the problem I have is that the people of Minneapolis, the people in Minnesota, the people in New York will not stand up for the officers. And then the officers get thrown into the bus. They go to prison for these things. And I'm just like, if the people of these towns are unwilling to take responsibility for their own communities, maybe they should be given a defunded police department to see what happens. Maybe then they'll realize and they'll change their vote.
Wasn't this officer, correct me if I'm wrong, on desk duty her entire career, and because of defunding efforts, she was put on duty here?
Yes.
And what do you guys make of the argument saying that she should have never been there and that she should be held responsible for making that accident? Because it clearly does seem like she was going after a taser, but she went after a firearm. She didn't have much experience in the field. Do you think there should be some kind of accountability for that? Or what's your rebuttal against people talking about that?
I think if you look, if she's obviously done on the force, and so, okay, fine. So there's accountability there, but I would stick by this, that he, at Daunte Wright, as the wanted criminal, and no, they didn't arrest him. I think what was the original story they told us, that he was arrested for like an air freshener or something, some totally bogus
Right.
BS.
Yep.
It wasn't that at all. He was a wanted criminal, and she was trying to arrest him. He is the one who decided to escalate this and turn it into a life or death. He put his life on the line. He decided to do that. That was his decision. When you start fighting and physically struggling with a cop, that's what's going to happen. That doesn't mean that the cop has every right to just pull out a gun and shoot you no matter what. But the moment that you, especially as a wanted felon on a weapons charge, the moment that you decide to make that decision, you have now taken your life in your hands. And I don't think that we should put all that onus on Kim Potter.
No, I agree. And let's throw it to Kyle Rittenhouse. Joseph Rosenbaum threatened and then decided to attack a young man carrying a rifle. He created the danger. Kyle Rittenhouse didn't do it. Kyle Rittenhouse fled from the attack and tried to get away. And then the Zvinsky fired the gun. I think when we look at a lot of these stories, there's a big factor in whether or not the individual was the person who instigated or created the harm. Now, of course, the left is now lying about, first they lied here. He was pulled over for an air freshener. The cops, it was unjust because they need the cops to be the ones who created the danger. When in reality, we know this story is not the case. We know Kyle Rittenhouse didn't create the danger. And then I'll throw it to the Ahmaud Arbery case. Ahmaud Arbery ran towards the truck where Travis McMichael was armed with a shotgun, flanked him around the truck, and then grabbed the shotgun from him. Yeah. So whether or not, I think if the question of the citizen's arrest in that regard is that it was not legal, then yeah, you can't stop someone while armed. It's false imprisonment. It's a felony. And then if the person dies, that's felony murder. But what we also have to consider that Ahmaud Arbery was the one who tried grabbing the shotgun for him, creating that danger. Now, in that one, it's a little more complicated because you can argue the danger was created by the McMichaels for trying to stop him. That's why I think that one's a little more murky and nuanced. But ultimately, my point is, I think we typically say we side with those who are being responsible and not trying to create the danger. But what happens when the danger is resolved and the person who didn't create it is the one who's still alive? We don't lock them up in prison.
Yeah, it's made. I talk to cops all the time. I'm sure you have, and I have the same question. I respect the hell out of police officers who still decide to do this job, but they're in a position right now. I can't imagine doing this when you know that the moment, like you said, Kim Potter said, I'm going to prison for this. They know that the moment a criminal decides to turn things physical, the police officer is in a no-win situation. No matter what happens after this, they lose possibly everything. Either they could die, and if they don't die, if they commit the sin of not dying, then they could lose their whole life and go to prison. And it's a total. We can't have a functioning civilization when our law enforcement officers are put in positions like this.
This is why I'm almost entirely for abolishing the police. Almost entirely because part of me is like the police as law enforcement makes sense. We need, in my opinion, good functioning law enforcement. I think many of our anarchists and more ANCAP friends might be like, "Mrr." But I do. I think if you have a functioning legal system, you basically have what is supposed to be a neutral arbiter for conflict in our dense environments, and that makes sense. I don't want two neighbors showing up and punching each other in the face because they can't resolve a dispute. The cops get called, come, and they say we're the ones who are going to handle this. That makes sense to me. The problem I have now is that with that proposition you've mentioned, the police know, okay, I pulled this guy over. Now he's giving me the business. I'm out. I'm not going to stop him. He's a violent criminal wanted on a gun charge for armed robbery, but I will not be Kim Potter. But what happens if you get caught with a weapon? What happens if you live in New Jersey and like this woman from Pennsylvania, she drove across the bridge, go to Atlantic City, didn't realize she couldn't do this and had her legal gun with her. In Pennsylvania, you're allowed to have weapons. She drove across the bridge, gets pulled over, and the cop gleefully said, ma'am, you are going to prison for 4 years, and tried to actually destroy her life. The problem I have now is you do have these police like Kim Potter saying, I'm going to prison because she knows the political power of Black Lives Matter. But you had cops in Minnesota traveled south 20 miles to find a salon. I believe it was a salon owner who refused, a cafe owner. She refused to close her business during the COVID restrictions. And the sheriff shows up with a smile on his face and arrests her. If these cops are scared of Black Lives Matter to the point where they will let them get away with riots and murder, but they're not scared to arrest regular Americans, working class citizens, and conservatives because these people never do anything to resist, we have a police force that will disproportionately imprison good, honest Americans. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Abolish the police.
Yeah, I am sympathetic to the idea of in these cities where we're just saying, well, okay, give them what they want. If this is what they want, then let them. You look at San Francisco and all the looting and everything, and I know there are a lot of people on the right who are saying, well, hey, this is what they voted for, so I got no problem with it. And I understand that, but then also I can't, as fundamentally a law and order and justice kind of guy, I just hate the idea of bad guys winning. And so, yeah, I understand that you live in San Francisco, you voted for this, but at the same time, these are really bad guys who are doing the looting and the stealing, and I don't like the fact that they win. And the bad guys, you get rid of the cops in the middle of the city, and it's going to be really bad for whatever good people decide to stay there, but the bad guys will love it. I mean, they're fine with it.
The cops are acting like bad guys in many instances. A lot of times there's been a lot of incidences where police officers don't respond to crimes. A lot of times police officers just stand by and watch crimes happen because of this kind of chilling effect, which you correctly pointed out. But when it comes to political issues, when it comes to going after people for not doing the mask mandate or not locking down when they were supposed to, they're on people like White on Rice, and they go after them, and they go after them for the fullest extent of the law. And I think there's an argument to make here that the police forces have been politicized to a point where only certain crimes based on your ideology get punished while others get ignored. I would call that behavior the behavior of bad guys enforcing bad edicts and decrees.
I think there were a lot of good cops. A lot of good cops quit. I think when it got too hot, you had a lot of cops saying, I'm not going to enforce these mandates and lockdowns, I'll resign. A lot of who are saying, I will not enforce or be part of vaccine mandates, they resign. And who's left remaining? The cops who are like, I don't care, tell me what to do and I'll do it. So let me ask you a question. Do you believe that, what's your stance on the Second Amendment?
Fully in favor of it, yeah.
Do you think it's like absolute?
Yeah.
So I've grown to be, fairly absolute on the Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It means what it means. It's verbatim. That means arms, period. It means during the Revolutionary period, there were privateers. Privateers had arsenals in these battleships. They had cannons, they had grape shot, they could take on governments, and they would. The privateers would get a letter of marque and then go and disrupt French supply lines. These were private citizens with cannons. And so the Founding Fathers are like, you can have all this stuff, all of it. Because is a militia just a bunch of guys with muskets? No. Militia has weapons, artillery, they have other means. Today, I think if you want to change these laws, if you want to ban guns, well, you got a Second Amendment to contend with. So the issue now is, in places like Chicago, in New York, where they don't allow you to even bear arms in any capacity. The cops, in my opinion, who would arrest you simply because you have a gun. I don't care if you're a gang member. I don't care if you're Antifa. I don't care if you're a working class plumber. You have a right to keep and bear arms, period. I don't care if you're Gage Grosskreutz in Kenosha at a riot. You have a right to keep and bear arms. You don't have a right to use that weapon illegally to cause damage, to hurt people, but you can have a gun on your person. Second Amendment says it. My opinion is very much thanks to, credit to Michael Malice, who's going to be very excited by the shout out, because I'm going to say it again. The police, and we were talking about this when we were in Austin, a police officer who arrests a person who is constitutionally keeping and bearing a gun and doing nothing else is a bad guy. And the problem I have now is
if he's constitutionally doing so, yeah.
Right, but
what about a felon?
So that's a good argument. Felons have gone through due process and have lost the right to keep and bear arms. So I would argue that. But I've said this before. We had Alan West on the show, and I said I think you get out of prison, you get your gun back, you get your vote back. But many people correctly pointed out that the Constitution's rights can be rescinded through due process, meaning you can lose your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if you commit a crime. We lock you up. And so you can lose your right to keep and bear arms if you commit a serious crime. You go through due process, and then we say, as a felon, you cannot keep and bear arms. That I agree with. I think there should probably be some, a time limit. It's not just indefinite for the rest of your life. It should be like, and you're now a registered felon for 3 years, and after that, we allow you to go back to having all your rights or whatever. But my issue is in Chicago. We have a lot of cases where 35-year-old dad, he's got 2 kids, Chicago's gang territory, he lives on the south side, and he's like, I need a gun to protect my family, but the state won't let him do it. So he gets a gun by driving to Indiana, buying it legally, going home with it. The cops show up at his house. You are going to prison for the next, 6 years for illegal gun possession, which I don't believe should exist. Those cops, in my opinion, are bad guys. There's good working class people who just want to defend themselves, and they get targeted in this way. Or there's 2 big stories. You have in Chicago, a 60-year-old woman from Tennessee was from Kentucky, I'm not sure, was going to Chicago for a vacation, and she brought her snub nose 38 or whatever. And when she was at this year's tower, now Willis Tower, they asked before she went up to the observation deck, do you have, if you have any weapons, when you go through the metal detector? She said, yeah, I have my concealed carry with me and my permit. And the cop was like, all right, ma'am, turn around, hands behind your back, you're under arrest. And she did go to prison. They actually sent her to prison, and they said, we don't care. Illinois' laws are not, Kentucky's. That to me is evil.
Agreed.
So I don't think, at that time, you had bad cops, and you had a lot of bad cops willing to absolutely enforce laws that are unconstitutional. The main issue I have now is, how many resignations have we seen over the past year or two? There's a video of a cop in Seattle being like, you guys win, yelling at protesters. I quit. I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. They've been pressured out by the defund the police, the political pressures of the Soros DAs. And what's left is, you got a video from Seattle where there's a guy walking backwards with a baton or with a bat or something. Antifa is pointing things at him and threatening him, and he's walking backwards with his hands up, telling him to back off. Cops are waiting at the intersection, and they yell at him, get on the ground, hands on your head. Then they walk over to Antifa and go, I'm so sorry about that. Would you mind having your dog step back? I don't want anyone getting hurt. Thank you so much, ma'am. And then they arrest the guy. The guy who was retreating from Antifa is the guy who got arrested. That's the problem I have right now. If cops are scared of Black Lives Matter and Antifa, that means it's going to be independents, conservatives, libertarians who are going to be shuffled into prisons, and they're going to be releasing Antifa or refusing to prosecute.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the whole following orders excuse is never that never washes, and we know that historically, and that goes for cops too. And I would agree that finding someone who's made some basically that's like a paperwork mistake where someone held the gun legally and they crossed state lines, and then you just decide, okay, I'm going to ruin your life. I'm just because I can, I'm going to ruin your whole life. That is definitely evil. And I do agree also that there's a problem when we are actively pushing the good ones out through all the things that you point out. But I still think that you look at the cops who are still on the force. There are still plenty of good ones left, and I've talked to them myself, and the reasons that they give why they're still there. One reason is actually I believe in this job and I care about it. Another reason is the real simple one. With this is what I've done my whole life. This is how I feed my family, and this is how I support my family. And I'm always sympathetic to that because I have 4 kids myself. I haven't been in a position where I've had to think about, am I just going to leave all this behind and I won't have a way to feed my kids? I haven't had to think about that. But when you really have to think about it, it's just I can certainly understand someone deciding I'm staying in this because this is my livelihood.
I do agree, and I don't think. I think many of the cops that are enforcing this stuff are mindless in that they don't know, they don't care. But I think that means the good cops that remain and those who say, look, I know that's bad, but I have to support my family, they need to start enacting police nullification. Like jury nullification, the officers should refuse to enforce laws, and many are, that are unconstitutional or unjust. So we have sanctuary counties, sanctuary states for gun rights, where the police have straight up said, we are not going to arrest anybody for guns because they have a right to keep and bear them. Now, I think it's reasonable. If I've got some kind of long gun or a handgun on my person, I think if a cop comes up to me and says, we want to check out the weapon to make sure, it's safe and we want to talk to you about it within reason, I think that's acceptable. But I also think then if I was in an area where, say, the open carry is not allowed, or a person was, let's say a person, I believe the police should probably be like, hey, we want to talk to you about the weapon. We want you to know that the statute here is that you can't have the weapon out in public, but we're not going to enforce that because it's unconstitutional. We want to make sure you're not committing any crimes. We want to make sure everything's safe. You're good. Have a nice day, sir. I think the police should be doing that.
And they already do. They do it in favor of BLM. They do it in favor of Antifa, and we have to call it out for what they're doing.
That's right.
And that line, I have to disagree with you a little bit here, Matt. That line, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing this just for my kids, just for my family. This is what led to the worst human atrocities all throughout recorded human history. I'm not just talking about Germany. I think that's overplayed, overused. But when we look at, for Soviet Russia as an example with the KGB, even if we look at what's happening right now in Australia, people are being hauled off into camps because they were around people that tested positive for COVID, and police officers are literally ruining people's lives, telling them that they can't go to the supermarket, denying them basic human rights to food and water, all because they didn't comply with the whims of the state, and the state is only willing to pull it off because officers saying, well, I'm just doing my job, I just have to feed my family. I think it's dangerous, and I think that needs to be called out. Yeah,
just to clarify on that point, I don't accept that excuse for police officers who are doing something evil like we talked about. I agree with you there. That goes into the I'm following orders, I'm feeding my family. If you're doing something evil, you're doing something evil. There's no excuse for it. I'm talking about in general. We look across the country, the police officers who, in spite of all of this, are still on the force. Why are they there? I think the good ones anyway. I think that's when you get into two reasons. One is I really believe in this and I want to do it, and the other is I'm feeding my family. And so it's not just that the only cops who remain across the board are, the bad ones. I don't think that's true.
Let's talk about Australia. The first thing I want to do is highlight, we have this article here. NT records no new cases of COVID-19 overnight following 9 Binjari cases. This is Australian news desperately trying to bury the lead about the military transporting the indigenous to COVID camps. I want to show you this from Breaking 911. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong one. Where is it? It's right here. Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Talia Sarv. Breaking. 9 News has been told several people have absconded the Howard Springs quarantine facility early this morning. The police investigation is right now underway. Talia is a reporter. I believe she is the senior reporter for 9 News Darwin. Can anybody define absconded for me?
Well, I believe that means they up and left.
It sounds
Great
like a word I
definition.
made up.
Yeah, it does. It's a good word.
Yes, it means they up and left.
Yes.
And the police are investigating.
Oh, what?
Why?
That's crazy.
I thought it was voluntary to be at the quarantine facility.
Yeah, I thought they were having fun taking Instagram
taking those
selfies of
selfies,
themselves.
yeah.
And,
Let me show you this. This is from abc.net.au. This is Australian Broadcast News. And they have let me see. Where's the story? I'm always struggling to find the part in here where they talk about the 38. Here we go. He said, this is Gunner, this is the minister of the Northeast Territories. He said the authorities had identified 38 close contacts in Binjari, a number he said would likely rise, who were transported to Howard Springs on Sunday. Mr. Gunner said cases in Binjari were very concerning, but not surprising, yada, yada. He went on to thanked the military, the ADF, for sending, I think they sent out 20 individuals to help transport these people. He's urging them all to get vaccinated. And let me see if this is in the article as well. Authorities have identified, okay, so that's not it. There's another article, I don't have it pulled up, where they say, in the speech he gave, he said that Binjari will be entering hard lockdown. That means the citizens no longer have the 5 reasons to leave their house, which is exercise, food, visiting your one contact or whatever the 5 reasons are. Quite literally, this man has said, if you are in this territory, you cannot leave your house to eat.
That's insane.
Then they've started transporting close contacts and suspected cases to the quarantine facilities. Now, I'm reasonably assured by Claire Lehman of Quillette that this is impoverished communities who need desperate help and are being brought to hospitals. And I'm a blowhard who has no idea what he's talking about. Jesse Single, the reporter, says Tim Pool is pushing dangerous conspiracies or some other garbage nonsense. In reality, it's Jesse who hasn't done a single Google search of this before regurgitating garbage nonsense. What I have said is quite simply, if you tell indigenous people they can't leave their homes to eat, and then say, but by all means, get in the military vehicle or whatever vehicle being driven by the ADF to go to the quarantine facility, it's not voluntary. And if it was, we wouldn't see people absconding.
Oh, yeah.
And if the people did abscond from the facility, you wouldn't see police putting out press releases saying they've started an investigation to search for those who scaled the fence and escaped.
Yeah, they had a national manhunt for a man that sneezed
Yeah,
in an
it's
elevator
true.
in Australia. This was also the same guy, I believe his name was Gunner, who came out and publicly said that if you took the vax, but you don't like the mandates, that you're an anti-vaxxer because you're providing aid, support, and comfort to anti-vaxxers. That's his definition of an anti-vaxxer now,
Wow.
is aiding and supporting anyone who doesn't like what the government is doing on their whims. And they literally took, this was a couple days ago, 38 indigenous people had the military haul them off into these quarantine camps because they had close contact with someone who allegedly tested positive. So there's also indigenous people coming out and making videos alleging that they are being kidnapped, that they're also having forced to be medicated. So again, it's still untrue if any of these allegations are true or not, but these are some of the allegations against the state of Australia that is becoming more Orwellian and more dangerous by the day, and I wouldn't be surprised if these accusations were true.
What is it the lowest level of hell? Is that how it works in with Dante's
the
Inferno?
Rings. Yeah, I'm not
The
sure
Rings?
which one.
Is
Betrayal?
Are you familiar with Dante's Inferno?
Yeah.
Is it the lowest level? Is that how we would say it properly? There's that saying that the lowest level is reserved for traitors, disloyal.
Yeah.
I think. Is that I don't know, but I'm
think
reminded
it's
of
the
that
inner
line
circle,
from
yeah.
that great line from Pirates of the Caribbean where he
Yeah,
says,
it's the inner circle of hell. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what Jack Sparrow says is the lowest level of hell is reserved for betrayers and mutineers, and he says that to the people who betrayed him and mutinied or whatever. And that's why I think it's really important to bring this up in the context of Claire Lehman of Quillette. Are you familiar with Quillette?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, this was very much an intellectual dark web publication a few years ago, challenging wokeness and the orthodoxy of the cathedral and the state, and now Claire Lehman has become an overt state propagandist, literally posting pictures of bikini-clad women enjoying their stay at the forced quarantine facility where we are now getting indigenous people transported to, and the police now putting up press releases to try and find those who've absconded from them.
Yeah. Can I read the definition of abscond real
Oh,
fast?
yeah,
I
do
looked it up. Okay, so absconding is leaving hurriedly and secretly, typically to avoid detection of or arrest for an unlawful action such as theft. So they're definitely concerned about
So it's
being
by force.
detained. This is 100% by force.
No one is going here voluntarily to be detained by
Sneaking
force, and you
out.
can't
Yeah,
leave.
and they're literally admitting it in the words they use.
There was a woman who escaped, and they went on a hunt to try and find her. A man who escaped. Now we have this story. The thing about Claire is that she's look. I made a tweet where I referred to these camps as concentration camps. I was being hyperbolic. It's Twitter. Someone said, "Here's a picture of their quarantine facilities," and then I put asterisk concentration camp. She took that and went off and called me, insulted me and said that I was exaggerating. And my point was, look, we've already seen videos. There's a video, I don't know if you've seen it, Matt, where a guy is at his house and the police pull up. And the media's there waiting. And they interview him as he's being brought out and arrested by the cops. Arrested, quote unquote. And he's like, I don't know what's going on. They're telling me I've tested positive for COVID. And I guess I'm going to go in this van and go with them. And they announced that he will be indefinitely quarantined. That's literally what they said in the press reports. I'm like, I don't know where they brought him, but this video exists. My point was, if they build camps to house people they say are a danger or undesirable, how long until they are concentration camps where they go to a community and say, you are being transported to this facility? How long until there's a protest against the lockdowns and they say, oh, the anti-lockdown protest was a super spreader event. Got to round up all those protesters and send them to quarantine because they could be infected. And I was told by a reporter for ABC, I was told by Claire Lehman that I was a conspiracy theorist. I was told that these were just international arrival bungalows. And now more and more we're learning they are forcefully denying people food, forcefully relocating them with military assistance, and people are trying to escape these facilities. I don't care if the photos look lovely, and they've posted great little photos of the beds and little welcome packs and sandwiches and smiling hot babes in bikinis. You want to put out propaganda, by all means do it. But when you put out reports about people trying to escape this place, yeah, I'm going to call it a concentration
That was the
camp.
cop's own words, I think. Escape, right? Didn't he just say? We're trying to
Yeah.
prevent these people from...
Abscond.
I'm going to use that when I leave here.
You will be absconding.
Matt, you had
Yeah.
something to say?
Yeah, I think people, when you use words like concentration camp, and I think you can make an argument for that phrase in a kind of a literal sense. It's a camp where there's a concentration of people there. And then we get into the semantics. Oh, you can't say that. We're calling it a rival bungalow. I think one thing is that people, there are a lot of people who they just cannot wrap their heads around the idea that things could really get that bad or be that bad. The idea that the government would put people into camps at all. It's like, we don't, that's in the past. That's not a thing that happens anymore. We've moved past that as a world. It's just not possible. They don't want to accept the reality or the possibility that something like that could even happen. I think that's a lot of what that is.
The Nazis didn't come out one day and say, everybody, we're going to execute you in death camps, get in the trucks. That's not how it went down. There's horrifyingly photos of people smiling, getting in these vehicles, getting on these trains. People were posting them on Twitter.
Yeah, and they use the excuse of a sickness to get a lot of people away from their communities to go on the trains. And one of my favorite responses to that lady that you just mentioned, that's Claire?
Claire Lemon.
Claire,
Lehman,
yeah. One of my favorite responses to her tweet was a picture of a Japanese internment camp, and it was the Japanese people playing softball. And look, these Japanese people
nice,
really
yeah.
enjoyed their internment camps here in the United States as well. They were playing sports, and that's akin to, again, compare. It's not fair to really compare a lot of World War II stuff, but when we're going into a place where the government is saying that you're an anti-vaxxer because you're aiding and supporting people's ideology and not believing in the government. That's
when you
very,
oppose. He said when you oppose the mandate,
Yes.
you are anti-vaccine.
Yes.
Exactly. You're an anti-vaxxer. That's very dangerous language. The state is empowering themselves with powers that they shouldn't have, godlike authority over individuals' sovereignty, over individual bodily autonomy. And when that happens, historically, bad things happen.
Yeah, we should just be able to say that if we're in a position where the government is forcibly containing people against their will who have not committed a crime or even been accused of a crime, then that leads to very bad places. And people get upset about Holocaust comparisons and everything. And sometimes they get called like, well, that's anti-Semitic, which of course is absurd because the point of the comparison is that this is a really bad thing. And the other point of the comparison is that we don't want it to get like we've seen in history how bad it can get when you allow the government this kind of leeway. We don't want it to get there. So let's pay attention now.
But
before
also,
it's there.
the response to my tweets was that people were saying, well, is there evidence they're taking these people by force, Tim? Is there evidence that these indigenous people were forced by the military to go? And I'm like, why is that even a question? That is a propaganda manipulation in an attempt to try and make it seem like people are happily going into forced lockdown where they're not allowed to leave.
And they're not even sick. They're just suspected of being sick. That's another crazy element of here that we need to talk about as well.
I'll put it this way. If you are told you can't leave your home, you are told that you're not allowed to go outside for food, and then we do have a van waiting outside to take you to a quarantine facility where you will not be allowed to leave, but we do have food. Yeah, they're forcing you. Like if you lock someone in their house and starve them and say, you can only come out when you agree to go to the camp where you'll never be allowed to leave, well, for 2 weeks or however long they hold you,
Right.
then you are forcing them.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you mentioned concentration camps. I was just reading about Hannah Arendt, and she was one of the Jews who managed to escape the Nazis. She talked about how hope was very much one of the Jews' worst enemies during the Holocaust because people would get on the trains voluntarily, which is real freaking interesting that Claire mentions that people are voluntarily doing this and that she's spreading this propaganda.
She never said voluntary. No. What happened was she said she admitted, she agreed that these people are being relocated, and she said it was because they're from poor communities that don't have access to hospitals. Other Australians commented, what do you mean? It was called the Catherine Hospital or whatever is right there. The immediate response from the propaganda says, oh, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's barely a hospital. I thought you said there was no hospital.
I
thought you said it wouldn't happen. Now it is happening, and you're saying it's a good thing. Then, of course, when there was a massive backlash, because in no context is this good, the media in Australia and the government officials started saying that me and a few other people were conspiracy theorists. And I am proud to say that in one of her tweets, she referred to Majid Nawaz and I as conspiracy theorists putting out false information. And I'm honored to be named alongside Majid Nawaz. He's a great thinker. He's a brilliant guy. He's a good dude. And wow, I thank you. That's a great compliment. It's amazing. And it turns out they can lie all they want, but all I'm doing is literally quoting their official news sources, The Guardian, and their own police releases. I'm just critical of what they're doing, and they don't like it.
I just saw a chat that said Auschwitz had a wouldn't you have an opera house
Interesting.
and a swimming pool? Is this
I look.
Maybe it didn't.
What people, history is condensed when people look at it. So our last understanding of what happened with the concentration camps is how horrifying it was, and we all know what they did.
Right.
But you're not going to get millions of people to load themselves into train cars by telling them what your end plan is.
Exactly.
And not only that, I was reading about this, and the craziest thing was that there were a lot of Jewish people in Germany who didn't believe it. When the op-eds were coming out saying the Nazis wanted to do this stuff, we're planning on doing it, they were like, that'll never happen. This is exactly what we're seeing now with Australia.
You know what happened when the American troops came in and the French and the British came in and liberated those camps? You know what they did to those German people that pretended like they didn't know what was going on? They put them into forced labor and made them clean the camps.
Interesting.
Wow.
Don't act like that's not going on.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the concentration camps were deemed also work camps. That's where my family was sent into. My great grandmother was, of course, sent into one of these camps because they didn't like what was going on. They wouldn't sign their Polish citizenship over to a German citizenship. They resisted. The Stasi beat up my great-grandfather, killed him. They sent my great-grandmother to a work camp, and they sent my grandmother, who's still alive, into one of the work camps as well. And, of course, they didn't tell him, like, hey, this is where things are, they didn't tell him, like, hey, this is where their plan, obviously. They always said what people wanted to hear or needed to hear in order to comply and go along. And then, the story I'm told by my grandmother is once my great-grandmother resisted and was trying to organize something at one of the labor camps, they sent her to a different camp, and that was one of the concentration camps located near Gdańsk, Poland, and that's where she went missing while my grandmother stayed at that work camp and then was there ever since. Of course, then Russians came in, and then the Soviets came in and then took over Poland and then ruled in their own decree. And she even says that what the Soviets did was even, in many instances, even worse than what the Germans did to the Polish people.
The original definition of concentration camp was a camp where a group of people are concentrated for, a variety of reasons. But that was 1800s. With World War II, concentration camp came to take a very serious meaning, which typically refers to camps where people are brought to eventually die.
Right.
So, of course, I'll be the first to say, when I said asterisk concentration camp, I am, of course, being hyperbolic to make a point.
Right.
Don't let governments build camps, pick people up and force them to go there.
Let's not go there.
Bad things happen whenever that happens.
Right.
I think it would also be helpful, maybe just as a collective, as a culture, if we. One of the problems is we go to the Holocaust analogy all the time because it's one thing that we know that everybody will. It's one of the few historical facts that we know that everyone knows. But maybe we expand our historical analogies because there are many examples. In fact, you don't have to go that far geographically or in terms of timeline to find, I think, maybe even better comparisons to what we're going through right now. In Stalin's Soviet Union, there's some parallels there as well. So part of the problem is that we always go to the Holocaust, and that's because of the kind of like in our culture, the historical illiteracy that we can't talk about any other historical event and be sure that everyone's going to know what we're referring to.
Right. Everybody basically knows what went down in World War II, and so it's an easy reference to make. It's so powerful, pronounced, and it's like the epitome of evil in a lot of people's minds. Even though the Holodomor, what Stalin was doing, was massively evil. What did the communists kill? 100 million people? That is to this day a dangerous ideology. And when you look at what's going on today, it's kind of scary that. These people still exist. They're gaining power. They're pushing their ideas through institutions. And it's worrying what that would mean for the rest of us if we don't stand up, speak out now, and challenge these institutions and try and get jobs there. And there's so much that needs to be done to try and push back on this stuff.
Yeah, my grandmother, who literally saw her father killed by the Stasi, said that the Soviets were way worse than the Germans comparatively to what they did to the Polish people. There's also a lot of Polish intellectuals, a lot of professors, a lot of scholars that were literally taken away in the middle of the night by the Soviets and then executed in the middle of woods. No one really likes to talk about that as well, but there was a large number of executions, a lot of people sent to labor camps, which of course eventually led to them dying in these labor camps because of the conditions there. And truly, Germany is one aspect of it, but there's a whole nother aspect that absolutely is being significantly underplayed, and that of course is what communism has done to the world.
The Gulag Archipelago is a book that should be assigned. It should be assigned reading in public school.
Yeah.
Of course it isn't, but that's something that at least the first two volumes, and it's kind of it seems like a daunting task to read, but it reads you could read through it pretty quickly, given what it is, and that of course Solzhenitsyn in the first, I think it's the first chapter of the first volume, kind of plays in a lot of what we're talking about here, is because he talks about how the secret police would show up and they would just, they'd show up one day and they'd just arrest you and they're going to send you off to a labor camp and you'll be gone for 10, 15 years or you'll never come back maybe. And everyone knows that this is going on, and yet everyone just still convinces themselves that it won't happen to them. Yep. It can't be that real. And so he talks about how somehow, even though like you see this happens to your neighbor, it happens to your cousin, your aunt, the person across the street, and yet when they come for you, you're still shocked and in a panic and surprised this is happening. Because it's something psychologically where we just can't believe that it'll happen to us.
I think that when they finally do come for you, It's under the guise of it's just come with us. It's a
It's for your
temporary
safety.
thing. It's for your safety, and people just go okay, and they grab their bag and they peacefully go along with them. And then
Yep. They hope it'll work out.
yep,
Yeah.
because people they keep saying it can never happen here. And look at so much that has happened here. It's literally happening right now all around us. The lockdowns, the restrictions, the mandates, and people are still saying it's fine, it's normal, it can't happen here.
The illegal mandates that
Yep.
were again shirked by the courts, I hear.
Living in
Again.
good times and living in peace is an exception to the rule. The rule of history is conflict, it's fighting, it's democide. I mean, my uncle, not so long ago, kidnapped by the Soviets, tortured by, of course, the government there for not having his paperwork at a random paper please checkpoint
Well,
in Poland.
People need to understand, Luke, you were born in the you were
Yep.
born in a Soviet satellite.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the Soviet Union existed, and you were born in a country that was experiencing this. This is within our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Stuff was going down.
And it could happen again. I mean, a lot of
Here,
people who live
yeah.
through it are saying
It's-
the same exact thing is happening, repeating. People are making a lot of references to the Cultural Revolution in China. People are making a lot of references to what happened in Soviet Russia. And I think there are some very scary lessons to learn there that I do believe in a smaller instance are repeating and could fully roll downhill towards even worser versions of what we saw in China and the Soviet Union because of the technocratic angle that is a full-on track, trace, and database society that sees everything. Imagine if Stalin, if Mao Zedong, if Hitler had the power of total information control, total dominance, and was able to control what people thought. That power right there is
Let me-
absolutely frightening.
I just want to stress that point. Talking about Luke being born in Poland when the Soviet
wall
Union
was
existed.
still- yeah, the
the
wall
wall
was still there.
What we're experiencing now is kind of like a recess.
Yeah.
It all comes back. Like Luke mentioned. I mean, it was throughout the 20th century. You had World War II, and then you had the Soviets. It was 100 years of authoritarianism and just horrifying things. And we have this period now where it's kind of been okay, but now it's bubbling back up to get bad again. So if we don't, fight for our values and stand up and say no,
And protect yourself from cult worship,
Yep.
obsession with Trump, Biden, Fauci, anybody really. But that's a lot of these communist regimes came to power totalitarian, like Hitler, Mao, Stalin. They were a cult of personality in a lot of ways.
we're going to go to Super Chats. If you
Yes.
haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to go to timcast.com to become a member for that members-only segment, which will be coming up around 11 or so p.m. But now we're going to read your comments, see what you got to say. One person said, don't forget about the Uyghur Muslims. Still happening today. This kind of stuff still happens.
I need proof because people hit me on Twitter and they're like, "It's false news. That's
Propaganda, lies.
Western propaganda."
Don't believe it. I don't buy it, dude. Look, it's you look at what China has done, what they do, and what they're doing, and I'm just like less inclined to believe.
I'm
people
with you.
tweeting.
Correlation. I can't. It's not proof.
And the United States does really, really awful
Yeah.
things too. I'm not here to play games and be like, America's
It's not
better.
about
Like,
America. I just want proof
Right.
that these camps are real.
There's videos,
I've seen
yeah.
videos
People
of like
being loaded
bald
on
people
trains.
getting loaded on trains, but no
and that's true. It's like
context.
Right. It's hard to know exactly what the context is, but I'll put it this way: it's hard to know for sure. But if they're not going to let people in to do these investigations and they're going to bar us from, say, Wuhan and all that stuff, then I'm just going to err on the side of I don't believe you.
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that.
All right, we got some super chats here. The first one, I can't read your name, sorry, because we have that pinned merch up, which
Oh, yeah.
blocks your name, unfortunately. But check out that Step on Snack and Find Out shirt in that chat. Sweet baby gang for life.
Yes.
What is it?
I can't talk about it. I can't explain it.
Is it related to Mark Zuckerberg, Sweet Baby Back?
It's not
barbecue?
related to. It's not related to anything. It's
Okay.
just the Sweet Baby Gang is.
What it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
That's all.
All right. This one seems important. I guess Dermy Wormy says, Matt, what will it take to have you and the rest of the Daily Wire play Halo Infinite?
Oh.
What is Halo Infinite?
That's a good start.
I didn't know if that was like a thing for you guys, if someone was asking that.
I've started playing a couple of video games on like the YouTube and doing the video game reaction. I don't play any video games at all, so that's why it's a thing. But yeah,
I don't know if the Daily Wire had like a Halo Infinite thing they were doing, but
I mean,
somebody
I
else-
would do it.
Yeah.
Oh,
there
there
you
you
go.
go.
Yeah.
I'll do it because that's the way it works over there. They just tell me that, oh, we're doing this thing, and I show up, and then
do
we're recording, and I just do it. So
That's great.
Do you play the banjo?
I have a banjo, and the truth is that I've never played it at all. I don't know how to play it at all.
Oh, okay.
But I've had it in my studio. My wife got me a bit. I think it was like maybe a year after we got married, and she went out and got me a banjo because I had been talking a lot of game about how I wanted to learn it, and then she got it.
Called your bluff.
And she did, and she got it, and for me, and then she got me like a little booklet to learn how to do it, and then it just kind of sat there for years in the corner of the room, looking at me, judging me because I never learned it, and then I put it in my studio, and that's it. I'm a fraud, I guess.
All right, let's see. Catherine McGrath says, you've said once someone eats someone, they're a cannibal for life. What about people who are forced into it by circumstance? So the context here is we were having a discussion about Reza Aslan. He's the CNN guy who ate human brain. And I said, he's a cannibal. And we had a discussion about, are you defined by the worst thing you've ever done? And I'm like, a cannibal is someone who eats human, right? He ate human. And then the response I usually get is, yeah, but only one time. And I'm like, why do we tolerate that? Like, we're not going to call you a cannibal. Whereas if you kill someone, you're a murderer.
Yeah.
And then we're not going to be like, well, it was a long time ago. He's not a murderer anymore. So
He's an ex-murderer now.
former murderer. I don't know. What?
So, okay, so it's a little bit like being an alcoholic. They say in AA that once you're an alcoholic for life. You never change. Like, it's something you have to be constantly vigilant about. And I think one of the problems that these people have with the Reza Aslan thing is that he did, in fact, just do it once, whatever. But they need to understand that they're making like a bit of an equivocation by saying that it has to be a pattern. It doesn't have to be a pattern. If you murder someone, just one person, you're a murderer. You're not a mass murderer. That doesn't change. Doesn't really matter what you do. So it's a little bit, I feel like they're making a little bit of a
And what if you're
logical
forced
failure.
into it? I still think it applies depending on.
The question, forced into it, like you're stranded on an island.
Well,
and,
Reza Aslan, apparently, when he was sitting down with these religious types, if he didn't eat the brain, he could have been attacked by them. So the argument a lot of people have is like, he did this interview and then they told him, eat it now. And his perception was like, these people will chase, beat, and potentially kill us unless I do as I'm told.
Yeah, I think for that, you're out of luck. He's a cannibal for life. If we were talking about a situation where people are stranded or something and then you're starving and someone's already dead and then, those kinds of extreme situations, I think maybe I wouldn't define them by that for the rest of their lives.
I wouldn't call a soldier a murderer. I wouldn't call
Yeah,
Kim Potter a murderer.
That's fair.
I think that's an extreme statement for someone who's like in a life or death situation and forced to make a move they didn't want to make. As for Reza Aslan, he chose to enter that situation with these cannibals. He knew were cannibals. He knew who were consuming human flesh at the time, who handed him human flesh, and he could have run.
Right.
He did it for clout.
Like the issue with Rittenhouse, he ran. So I wouldn't call him a murderer. He ran away. He tried to avoid this. Kim Potter was trying to arrest a guy in a felony weapons charge who dove into his vehicle, and she accidentally shot him. Not a murderer. This guy, I don't know, man. I think it's an interesting point. How many grains of sand make a heap? It's a hard question. Sometimes hard to find.
Tricky.
Falconizer says, Tim, you need to get JP Sears on. I saw him live, and during Q&A, I asked him when he's going on your show, and he said he'd love to if he was invited. He was invited.
He was invited, and part of the problem, if you're seeing him in a live show, it's because he's really busy.
Yeah.
So part of the problem is he's too darn busy.
Just send him
JP,
another
do a
invite.
live show out in the East Coast and then stop by.
Yeah,
and have you
hop on
on
by.
because we think you're fantastic.
Or
He
we could
is
do a
great.
show together and
Oh.
work
Oh,
that out,
definitely.
and or we
Write
could book him
checks.
for a show. I think that would be good. I love his videos. I think they're
awesome.
very, very, very satirical.
I mean-
and extremely hilarious. And luckily, YouTube hasn't figured out how to censor satire yet. But when they do, he's gone.
We've got for Damastan. We
Yeah.
don't need to do anything to have an event there. We can just
Yeah.
literally be like 100 tickets.
Okay, we'll
Yeah,
do that.
and have him perform.
That'd be
And
great.
then we'll get a PA system and we'll get, some chairs.
Let's
and
book
we'll
him.
get-
Let's book
we'll
him right
order
now.
catering.
Fun. We got to
And
figure that
outdoor.
out.
Outdoor, you're talking?
Yeah. Maybe it's too cold.
Yeah, maybe when it's warm.
For sure.
Yeah.
Till like
We
April.
set up fire pits. It'll be
We'll
fine.
do it. We'll give ourselves 2 weeks, so it'll be in the
Cold.
50s. It'll be in the 40s or 50s. People can wear hoodies. It'll be fine.
Fire
Dude,
pits.
We should
Yeah.
do an arena with JP.
No, we'll do it. We'll do a big fire. We'll do a bonfire. It's a big open field. We'll do
That'll
a
be
bonfire.
awesome, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll,
that
we'll-
could be like our opening thing.
maybe Ryan Long will want to come,
Oh, that'd be fun.
Have a
And
lot
Danny.
of little
I like
fires.
that. Yeah.
and then we'll just hang out in a big open field, and we'll do it on a Saturday for the
Yeah.
whole day, just like a
Sounds
hangout.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll bring dirt bikes and we'll ride around. And
Next week.
next weekend, like not this
Yeah.
coming weekend, but the weekend after.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if we can
think
pull
so.
off a miracle.
Don't think
JP,
we
get in
can.
contact with us. Follow us on Twitter, and then we'll set it up.
All right. Ricky M says Jeffrey Toobin's incident needs to be referred to as Toobin-it. For example, where's Jeff out? Didn't you hear? The boss fired him. He was caught Toobin-it on last week's Zoom meeting.
That's good. That's good.
I honestly, his name is Toobin. You know what I mean? Like
perfect.
that's Lubin Toobin.
It's
you could say Toobin-it as a reference to male self gratification.
It's a simulation.
It's almost as good as Wiener. You know?
Yeah, I know, right?
Like it's in that ballpark.
You know what I love? Simulism, the simulation theory stuff. Certainly, this is a miracle. Yes. This is evidence of a higher power having created. All right, let's see.
Sense of humor for sure.
Eric Miller says, Tim, you mentioned Marvel. Matt looks like Netflix Daredevil. Also, Reza Aslan didn't lose it. He became super CNN and couldn't handle the madness. Yeah, you do kind of look like the guy who played Daredevil. You know? What's his name? I don't know.
I don't know. What is his name? I have no idea. Sorry.
I'm going to take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a superhero.
He's an actor. Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Jacob Howard says, Tim, you will not have my respect until you have Shapiro, Clavin, Walsh, and Knowles in your podcast at the same time in a van. By the way, Matt just bought your book for my little brothers. SBG all day.
Yeah.
Sweet Baby Gang.
Yeah.
What is it? Sweet Baby Gang?
Sweet Baby Gang, yeah.
Sweet Baby Gang. So actually, I think in January, we're going to be hanging out at the Daily Wire headquarters.
You are?
Yeah. We were trying to get us to come out. We went to Austin, and they were trying to get us the week before we went to Austin. So we'd bring our mobile studio, then we'd do the show from the RV with the Daily, like many people from the Daily Wire. And in Austin, we did the Super Show, the Austin Show with Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, Blair White, Michael Malice, Drew Hernandez, Luke, me, Ian, everybody else. And it was massive. If we could figure out a way to have, you, Clavin, Knowles, Ben, Candace, all like popping in and just having this rowdy, obnoxious thing. We got 2 million, views already.
So great.
Not to mention the live version got 600K, and then the podcast is at 200 or something.
I'm into it, and I'll say that we can do it.
Perfect.
I'm signing all of them
We
up.
got them to
right now.
commit
Let's
it.
go. Yeah.
So, I mean, we had 9 people on and it was a cacophony of craziness.
It was wild.
But it was fun. It was
Really
fun.
fun.
And Joe popped in for about an hour. We were
Yeah, he stayed for a
grateful
full
for him
hour,
to be
yeah.
there. And yeah.
I like how you guys rent out those big event spaces. And
Yeah,
just-
we did it at the Ryman in Nashville. And that was
that'd be
lot of
cool
fun.
to rent that out while we're down there.
Well, that was actually one of the plans we had was if we could do a Friday night live Timcast IRL in the venue and set up a studio table and get everything so there's like a live audience watching. That'd be great.
Yeah. It'd be super fun.
All right, let's read some more here. Okay. Doug Kaplan says, Matt Walsh, awesome guest, and I think you two should infuriate CNN, get on camera in disguise, and show facts on CNN lie off their own camera. Live CNN confession live. Mahaha. All right.
That's a strategy. I don't know. That would work.
People are saying LeBron has COVID. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of reports on that on social media. I don't know if it has been confirmed. He is double vaccinated, but as we know, that hasn't stopped a lot of people
Bongino. Is that true? Did Bongino
I
get...
didn't find that.
Okay, so someone was
Yeah,
lying.
I'm not sure. Just not sure.
Someone was yanking our chain.
Yeah, possible.
Did you hear that? Bongino got breakthrough COVID?
I didn't hear that. No, I didn't hear about LeBron either.
Yeah.
People must be yanking our chain in
You
these
don't
super
know.
chats. You can't believe what you read on the internet. You know what I'm saying?
True
You know, the thing is, I used to actually be. I'm embarrassed now. I used to be a big LeBron fan back in the day, and yeah, I know that's
Sorry.
That's the grimace. I know.
Cringe, Yeah.
But he just the last few years. Maybe I didn't see it before. It's possibly the case, but the guy's honestly a total scumbag.
he didn't seem to be like that before.
Yeah.
Something changed.
The
last 3
Washington
years or
Post
so.
is reporting Lakers star LeBron James out indefinitely due to NBA COVID-19 health and safety protocols. So
Maybe he's an anti-vaxxer.
if the CIA says it, it must be true.
Yes,
Oh, yeah, that's
yes.
a good
Thank you, Luke.
Just a Man says, you're right, Tim. We were founded on Judeo-Christian values, and guess what? We atheists had to change about those values, Tim, things like slavery. Okay, that's wrong. It wasn't atheists.
He's trying to credit atheists with abolishing slavery.
My goodness.
No,
It's not true. It's
well, we just talked about how people are historically illiterate. There we go. Good example.
in the 1800s, this country was 100% Christian. I mean, literally not 100%, but you get my point. Like,
Yeah.
atheism didn't start to rise until probably like 70s into the 80s and 90s, and even then, it was probably very few people.
Yeah, the abolitionist movement was 100% a Christian movement. but through and through. It wasn't just like they happen to be Christian. It was their Christian principles had led them to this. So
And I'm pretty sure to this day, I think what the country is like. What percentage of America is Christian? It's
like 70. It's declining, but it's still
Right.
70. I don't know,
Theoretically.
75%.
and I think in the 90s it was 80 or 90. You know,
It's high.
and so it's only a recent phenomenon where atheists are gaining political prominence. I mean, didn't we just have like some of our first atheist politicians in the past like 10 or 20 years?
I don't know.
So if you want to go back to the 1800s and claim it was atheists who were doing these things, it's just not true. I got no disrespect for atheists, none at all. I believe in God. I don't follow any theistic religions or anything like that. But I think it's, like you said, historically illiterate to claim that 90 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed, this country had a strong atheist movement trying to abolish slavery.
It's actually a real problem for atheists, and I'd be curious to. I've yet to hear an atheist really sort through this, but because one of the reasons why the abolitionist movement was definitely Christian is that it's based on this idea that we're all equal, created equal in the eyes of God, that we all have inherent human dignity, human rights. The doctrine of human rights is a doctrine. It's a religious doctrine that stems from this idea that we have human souls, that we are, that we have this kind of eternal significance. If you take that out of it and you're left with Darwinism, what do human rightes even mean?
You get wokeism. You get
Right.
might makes right. You get the it was what was it? Graeber. What was the name of the anarchist anarchist anthropologist? Was it David Graeber? I think his name was. He said, rest in peace. He passed a couple of years ago, I believe. But he said on Twitter that the left is embracing fascistic tenets. The idea that there's no truth but power, that might makes right. This is what wokeism is when they've lost a moral framework. They just say, if there is no moral framework, then why follow any rules? Why? It's really fascinating, to be completely honest, because for the longest time growing up, there was the religious argument of, without faith and religion, then where do your morals come from? And a lot of, Bill Maher would be like, that's a scary prospect, that the only reason you're not killing people is because you have this religion. And I'm like, yeah, honestly, I kind of understand that. Because you can see people who might not be religious, who might be atheist, but their values still came from parents who held these traditional values. Things like, you know what, man? Too many people today haven't read the story. It's story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Do you know the actual name of the story? I don't know much about the Bible.
Well, you had it. Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah. So you had. Do you know the name of the guy who was
Lot? Yeah.
Lot.
Yeah.
There you go. See, I don't know. It's been a long time since I read this, but I read it because I was trying to understand the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. I was trying to understand the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the inalienable rights, and it was pulling on a thread. It was like, here the founding fathers had these discussions about why these rights needed to be included, and they reference God, and they reference religion in the Bible, and they reference Blackstone's formulation, and I start reading about it, and then sure enough, you discover that the story is quite literally, God was like, this is a wicked, these wicked cities will be destroyed, and Lot is like, but what if there's righteous people there? And ultimately says, if there's but one righteous person, I won't do it. And the idea from that is you can't condemn the innocent because you're mad at the guilty.
Right.
The fascinating thing is, if you read about the philosophy of innocent until proven guilty, dictators and tyrants tend to hold the inverted view. I think Otto von Bismarck was his name. He said it is better that 10 innocent people suffer than one guilty person escape.
Yeah, yikes.
That is a nation that will imprison overwhelmingly innocent people and cause mass suffering on grand scales. That's evil. That's pure evil.
100%. Yeah, that's the definition of evil.
Well, I think that's what we're getting with these people who have no moral frameworks at all. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be religious or anything like that. You just have to recognize people's rights. All right. Eamon says, Matt, how's living in Loudoun County?
It was great. I felt connected with my true Virginia roots, but we did ultimately decide to move back to relocate back to Tennessee.
How long did you live in Loudoun?
1.5 days.
Oh,
So my wife and kids never made the move, and so that was a little
yeah.
bit of I didn't consult my wife
Distance is
before
tough,
buying,
yeah.
before renting a. She never agreed to live in someone's basement in Loudoun County, and
Okay,
so
that's fair.
that was
Yeah.
a little bit of a thing, and so
Loudoun County is about 30 seconds from here.
It's really
yeah,
cool.
we noticed we
Yeah,
drove her through it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you hop down the road. Of course, the schools are more like
It's about
20
an hour.
minutes.
Yeah, I thought it was
No.
further.
I don't think it's
drove
an hour.
I drove out there. Yeah,
It's like 20 minutes. Yeah, it's not that far. Loudon's not
Drove
that
it.
big.
Maybe I got stuck in traffic. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we go down there to where those schools are, relatively often. Okay, maybe it's a half an hour.
Yeah, it's a ways.
Maybe
It's not-
we'll
yeah.
meet
Well,
halfway.
Whatever.
Look, I know we're close to Loudoun County. I used to live here, so
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, of course, yes.
He goes on to say that was one epic mic drop speech back in September. Thanks for fighting the fight. Let's go, Brandon.
That was a good speech, Matt. Yeah.
yeah. Well, at the Loudoun County thing, it was so ridiculous because they give you 60 seconds to speak at the actual school board meeting, which no one could say anything in 60 seconds. And they make you wear a mask. It's like this whole ridiculous scene they had set up. We had to, if you wanted to speak in the meeting, you had to wait wait in a single file line outside of the room where the meeting was actually taking place because they wouldn't let any spectators in the room. And then they would call you in and you'd hear your name over the intercom and you'd come in and they'd set the timer. They give you 60 seconds. At 60 seconds, they cut off the mic and say, okay, you leave. Next person come in, like the single file thing. It's a total absurdity because they're just trying to stop people.
Right.
They know you can't really say anything in 60 seconds. So, and that's the whole idea, to stop you from actually saying anything.
Nathan Simpson says, Tim, you should try the postmodern paper generator. It's an AI that shows how you don't need to know anything to write the stuff. Agreed. Look at a lot of the early feminist YouTubers during like Gamergate and listen to what they're saying. And it's like, they're not saying anything. It is just buzzwords strung together to make it sound like they're smart. And then they'll give you their point at the end, which is a simple statement. It's like, now that I've said all these things you can't understand, this is why we have to do X. And they go, oh, I don't know, it sounds smart to me, I guess. And there are people who just want to fit in and be a part of it.
Yep.
They don't want to be weirdos. If they think it's popular, they will get on board. Sparty Matt says, I live in Oxford, MI, and teach school nearby. Please, everyone, tell your kids you love them, especially the hurting and broken young men who desperately need to know that anyone cares about them.
Yes.
IPAC says, Joseph Stalin said socialism is a necessary step. That's
right.
correct.
Yep,
Yes, he
that was
did.
Stalin, yeah.
Yep. Eric Miller says, Tim, socialism is simple. The means of production are controlled by the people. Then the government control the people. So then the government control the means of production. Now, if you made it this far, how do you like West China? Yeah. There will always be, in these systems, a centralized authority and control, period. There's no way for it to work. In fact, the system has a tendency towards power coalescing. That's it. These people who believe that there will truly be utopian communism are insane. As if they think raw materials are infinite. They think housing is infinite. They think conflict doesn't exist.
Milk
they think
grows on
humans.
shelves.
You know what? It's simple. You ever see the movie Equilibrium?
I don't think so.
It's with Christian Bale, and it's a society where everyone takes a drug every morning that suppresses emotion. Okay, do that, and then sure, you might have a perfectly working
might
communist
work, yeah.
society
Kind
where
of a Brave New World sort of thing.
Aren't those called SSRIs?
Yeah, something like that.
You get situations where there'll be four humans, but one of them will solve the problem so quick, and you're like, wow, that's great. Then the second time it happens, he does it again, and you realize, okay, if we put our faith and power behind this guy, we're going to survive as a group. If we let, no, I'm not pointing at any one of you guys, but like random people stumble around and make mistakes trying to lead us, then we're going to die. So it's this natural tendency towards centralization of authority and powers, kind of intrinsic in what we are as a species. I don't know if it's necessarily healthy, though.
I think it's the same thing that drives humans to innovate, actually. We don't want to expend energy. It's risky. So through evolutionary biology, through the gradual natural selection, the changes, humanity favored those who conserved energy to the greatest degree. That meant people who would have higher access to food, who were smarter, who were stronger, or faster, could run. So that way we'd have more energy to procreate, and those who had less energy couldn't. And that means when it comes to politics, people are like, the least amount of work I have to do is better for survival. So if you want to take care of it, I'll just do whatever you say. You end up with a lot of people saying, it's confusing, complicated, hard, and I don't want to be involved. And then they give up all their power.
Yep.
Simon Eric Alexia says, hey, Tim, did you know that you are mentioned in the book This is a Swedish Tiger, written by Aaron Flam? I think I heard that.
Huh.
I don't know to what degree
What's
they mentioned
about?
me or whatever. Sweden's a creepy country. I have no idea. I don't know what the book is.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah. Dragon Lady says, I ask, sir, what is the militia? It is the whole people. George Mason, founding father of the Bill of Rights. There you go, man. Colin Sanders says, SBG represent. We run this show now. We're taking over the internet. We're the new world order, SBG worldwide. P.S. Matt is the best Daily Wire host.
Oh, snap.
I
Shots
hear
fired.
that. I hear that. We'll have to have you
Host off.
have a host off
Host
with
off.
everybody, and when we
Love
come
it.
to Daily Wire HQ.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would consist of. I know that me and me and Ben Shapiro have a long-standing thing where we're supposed to have a push-up competition. So he keeps dodging me, but
We'll do it with a high-speed camera. So just the
He's
first
probably
one will be
training.
really intense.
Yeah,
He's gonna
sure.
show up one day and he's gonna rip his shirt off. He's gonna be like super ripped,
I'm
like
ready.
just six pack, and he's gonna be like, "You made a mistake, Walsh."
I can see it.
Christopher Fisher says the idea of cops as neutral arbiters is entirely fictional. Police in the U.S. have always been enforcers. Period. Full stop. SCOTUS repeatedly ruled that cops have no duty to protect or prevent crime. I understand that. I'm not saying that, every cop that comes out is a smiling officer friendly. I'm saying if two people are screaming at each other and threatening violence, the cops come and say, I don't know or care who either of you are. Stop it or else you'll be arrested. Like somebody who can do that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I'm looking at Luke. I'm waiting for some
Peacekeepers.
anarchist response.
Well, I'm surprised they're not doing political compass tests when it comes to what charges or what jail they're going to go to. I think
You've been
that's-
arrested, sir. Now, how would you describe yourself?
Political
It's
orientation.
like a
Sexual
cop.
politics.
You get pulled over for a DUI, and the cop's like, "Sir, you appear to be very drunk." On the political spectrum of left versus right, where would you find yourself? Left. I think your blood alcohol is 0.03. You're good to go.
It's called the social credit score. It already happens in China, and it's coming here to the United
That's
States.
right.
It is. Yeah.
Yep.
Exciting.
Red Dawn 1984 says, "Don't trust the media. Goebbels made propaganda." Videos depicting life in the ghetto, adults laughing and children playing in the playgrounds. And why it's remarkable. Claire Lehman, she responded saying, I found this hashtag about Howard Springs full of hot babes enjoying the quarantine camp that Timcast calls concentration camps. And then I think it was Jack Murphy who said, I couldn't help but notice that there's no photos of any regular people. It's all like hot babes and smiling families waving at the
Influencers,
camera.
Yeah.
It's clearly a PR campaign.
Just makes it creepier.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
worse. Yeah.
Yep. Hot babe sunbathing, smiling.
With
and it's-
bikinis and G-strings on.
Yep.
It's like look at footage from North Korea. Everyone's smiling and happy and clapping for their leader. It's
Yep.
Yeah, that's not staged.
right.
No, not
You
at all.
know, that's
Potemkin
authentic.
selfies.
Australia is creepy, man. Jeez. Vero Frady says, we are in an era of English socialism where government effectively runs business through regulations. Yeah, to a great degree, I would say yes, actually.
And there's a lot of regulations.
Yep. Dave Guerra says Japanese internment camps are not that far in the past. Ask George Takai. And that was here on American soil. I'd be interested to ask George
I
about
would
Australia.
too, yeah.
Which side is he going to fall on that one? He's going to be like, no, that one's okay.
Yeah.
The one I went through was bad, but this one's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Home B says, I'm more or less concerned if terrorists actually try and start hitting this country with roadside bombs on American highways or some other off-book things I can conceive. I mean, in terms of civil war or conflict, we're definitely not at any point like that, and I hope it never happens. It's ineffective. We are not in that era. We gotta win hearts and minds. We gotta convince people. We have to be persuasive and peaceful. The reason Antifa it gets away with it to a certain degree is because a lot of people are scared, but they do lose public support, which has a backlash to it. That being said, my friends, go to timcast.com, become a member. We're going to have a members-only segment coming up about around 11 or so p.m. You don't forget to smash the like button. You can follow us at Timcast IRL. You can follow me everywhere. Follow me on Instagram at Timcast. Matt, you want to shout anything out?
Well, I would mention my children's book. I don't know if I mentioned that yet,
Yeah,
but
no.
Johnny.
Oh, you have a book.
JohnnyTheWalrus.com. You can get my children's book. I'm a best-selling children's author, which is what I will be referring to myself as for the rest of my life. That's
Did it once.
That's what this was all about. Actually, was just so that I could call myself a best-selling children's author and start every sentence with, "Well, as a best-selling children's author, I think this." But yeah,
now you
JohnnyTheWalrus.com. Yeah.
Right on. What's your Twitter?
At Matt Walsh blog.
All right.
Well, thanks for coming on. It was great having you. And if you want to find out what I'm doing a lot of really exciting things on LukeUncensored.com. Today I did a video about my future plans, how people could get involved. And if you want to see that, just check out LukeUncensored.com. Thanks for having me.
You can also follow me at iancrosland.net if you want a little bit more of this. Happy to see you. Have a nice day. Catch you later.
And you guys can follow me on Twitter at Sour Patch Liz. I always enjoy Matt's talks, but I really enjoy this kind of more personal. I always enjoy these long form conversations. So thank you for
Definitely.
stopping by. Yeah, good times.
And don't forget, in the chat section right now on YouTube, there is the Step on Snack and Find Out shirt, which you can pick up. We're actually planning on having a new shirt once per week, so we're not going to be nearly as shirt prolific as Luke is. And our shirts are usually not super political, like with statements like Luke's are. Ours are more of like silly, like the gorilla or the Shiba or the snake. So we're going to have more silly shirts like that. And you can go to timcast.com, click store, and it's all available there. And it helps support our work, of course. And of course, bestpoliticalshirts.com.
Thebestpoliticalshirts.com.
Yes.
Luke's got the more
you.
political statements, and definitely that helps support his work as well. So we're really grateful to all of your support. We'll see you all over at timcast.com. Thanks for hanging out.
Bye, guys.